A multitude of small goblins, armed with all kinds of weapons, attacked the man standing in the middle of the room. Other weapons flew towards them, smashing the goblins' heads. One after another, they flew to the sides, receiving blows. It was the weapon of the young man standing in the center. It flew by itself and destroyed enemies. The goblins stood there in confusion as their fellow goblins were torn apart. The young man fought with everyone without making a single move, without even lifting a finger. An arrow flew towards him, but the weapon immediately stopped it. The young man noticed a goblin with a bow in the crowd who looked nervous. He noted that the enemies broke in, relying on numbers, and even fired without warning. If they think that Ban Yu-wan came to the dungeon relying only on his skill level, then they are deeply mistaken. The young man uttered the word "bang manga," and his weapon was transformed. A grenade launcher appeared next to him and aimed at the opponents. Ban Yu-wan gave the command and the weapon began to operate. When he was 4 years old, he began to read the book in the original language. His parents realized that he was very smart. His mother was surprised when he managed to learn English. However, the father realized that the child could not know the language of a country he had never even heard of, because no one taught him this. At that moment, an elderly man burst into the room and declared that Yu-wan had inherited a rich bloodline. It was his grandfather. He was glad that a child had finally been born who could fulfill the family's long-held dream of returning the Tower of Babel to their family. There was silence in the room because no one understood what he was talking about. Grandfather continued, claiming that the Tower of Babel really does exist. He took a notebook and pencils, saying that he would borrow them from his grandson, and began to draw. He also said that long ago, in a world full of chaos, their great ancestor had an unusual ability. He could give people the opportunity to understand each other. He showed a drawing and explained that thanks to this ability, the ancestor led people and built a tower that never collapsed. This was the Tower of Babel. Little Yu-wan was shocked. He didn't understand what kind of tower it was. Then he rejoiced, deciding that if their ancestor owned this building, then it would bring wealth. But the grandfather explained that their ancestor was a master of linguistics, capable of translating and creating any language. They, his descendants, should not forget this. The boy was upset to learn that even his grandfather did not know where the tower was. However, he assured them that as soon as they found her, something incredible would happen. The family would regain power and glory. Since he was a child, Yu-wan's grandfather had told him about their ancestor, hoping that his talent for languages would help him realize the family dream. Grandfather constantly told him about the adventures of their ancestor, in the hope that his extraordinary talent for knowledge would help to realize the family dream. But Yu-wan's abilities exceeded all expectations. As he got older, he sat at his laptop and checked his exam scores. A young man, an applicant to the Faculty of Political Science at the Diplomatic University, and he couldn't understand why the enrollment results were taking so long to appear. Suddenly, colored lights started flashing on the screen and interference appeared. He tried to turn everything off, but suddenly a huge icon with inscriptions appeared in front of him. The screen turned blue and the text was distorted. He had never seen an alphabet like that before. The screen showed that Yu-wan's documents had been accepted into the best academy in the alternate reality. He did not understand how one could read these strange symbols, but he understood that he would be called to the place where the practical assessment was carried out. If successful, he will become a student at the academy. He had only 10 seconds left to get ready. He decided that it was someone's prank, but then the next message appeared, about his admission to the political science department. He thought he might just be over-nervous. Meanwhile, the countdown continued, becoming faster and faster. Practice began, calling Bang Yu-wan to the practical evaluation site. At that moment, a girl entered the room, intending to ask if he had passed the exam, but the young man was already gone. A flash, flickering symbols, and the man fell from above into some kind of cave. The table showed that a special practical assessment had begun for candidates from the lower dimensions. Yu-wan didn't understand what was happening. This wasn't a game. He was actually called somewhere. He was told that he had to defeat the blind goblin and destroy the dungeon core. He had not submitted any applications, so he did not understand what practical assessment was being discussed. Turning around, he saw unknown creatures. They heard him and began to look for prey. Yu-wan realized that they were talking about him, and now he too understood their language. Does he really need to defeat these monsters to get out of here? It all felt like a game or a visual novel. but what was happening felt eerily real. My head hurt. The world around me seemed real. He remembered. The goblins were blind. If he wanted to survive, he had to fight them. But he didn't know how. Modern people don't even know how to fight a chihuahua, let alone a monster. He falls over from impotence. A loud, booming blow is heard nearby. The walls shake. The air seems to be compressed from the force hidden in this sound. Yuan instinctively presses her hand to her mouth, trying not to make a sound. Her heart is pounding in her chest, and anxiety is pulsing in her temples. He didn't know if the creature that attacked him could see him. He takes a deep breath, trying to regain control. The fear hasn't gone away yet, but his mind is taking over. A goblin appeared next to him, preparing to strike again. Yuan dodged masterfully. The boy lies on the floor, and the other goblins try to figure out what that sound was. One of them points in the direction from which it came, the other is unsure. One of the goblins claims that the man is definitely there and cannot be missed. Yuan understands that these creatures are blind, but have a high sensitivity to sounds and movement. They don't seem to just attack, but to chase their prey, coordinating their actions with each other. He realizes that no matter how well he hides, he will still be found. If he doesn't want to die, we need to come up with a plan quickly. He begins to observe the goblin's behavior and decides to use it to his advantage. There is no time to waste. He grabs rocks and throws them to the side, distracting his opponents. The goblins immediately rush to where the noise was heard. When they reach the place, they find only 2 stones. At this time, Yuan picks up a boulder, deciding it's time to take action. He throws it with all his might at the head of one of the goblins. The creature is in shock. It does not understand how the prey managed to attack it from behind. It turns around with the bat, intending to strike, but accidentally hits its comrade in the face. The club cuts through the flesh. The second goblin's teeth crumble and he groans in pain. Their language is a cry that the prey is resisting and must be destroyed. The goblin strikes again, but again hits his own comrade. The one with a disfigured face and a broken head, bleeding, staggers, losing his last strength. Both fall onto the cold stone floor, covered in dust and blood. Yuan's ears ring and he momentarily loses his bearings. He freezes, not believing what is happening, and tensely watches every movement in front of him. An object comes into his field of vision, a thrown bat. But suddenly something moves under the dead goblin's body. The second one, alive, wounded, breathing heavily, slowly crawls out. Their eyes meet. The moment stretches into eternity. Tension hangs in the air as if before an explosion. Yuan apologizes internally, but he understands that he tried to kill him and should have been prepared for this outcome. He raises his weapon, trying not to hesitate. If he can't finish off even a wounded enemy, he won't have a chance to get out of here. He kills the second goblin, realizing that he has survived this time. Sparks and glowing hieroglyphs burst from the goblins' bodies. A congratulatory table appears. The first hunt in the dungeon has been completed successfully. The reward is the power of the upper dimension. The Babylonian Codex is opened. A magic circle forms around his hand. This attracts the attention of the young man. He realizes that the power of the Babylonian Code has been activated. The said power is provided by the owner's language diagrams. The hieroglyphs are registered. Unlike phonetic symbols that represent sounds, these signs convey a concept directly through their form. The common concept of the 2 goblins, life demons, was extracted. Yuan couldn't understand what this removal meant and what absorption meant. It turns out his abilities aren't limited to linguistics. He can extract concepts from his opponents. Absorption 0.2. Demon. Demons are essentially concepts that humans are unable to understand, retain, or separate. Such concepts can be captured in code and applied to other objects. He can either save them for later or apply them right away. Should he try applying them right now? He takes the plunge and brings the concept to himself. Absorption 0.4. Life. Increases the owner's life force to 10.4. His overall abilities and potential increase, and he feels more confident. Absorption 0.2. Path. Increase in strength up to 10. The body becomes stronger, healthier. He clenches and unclenches his fingers and realizes that this is not just a sensation. The strength, the reach, the skin, everything changed. He truly absorbed the goblin concepts. Now it is clear to him what seizure and absorption mean. The bodies of the goblins from which the abilities were extracted disappeared, leaving only the clubs. If the act of applying a concept works for him, then he can apply it to other objects. It is indeed possible. Now he is able to leave the dungeon. He is confident that now all his enemies will be defeated. Using the unlocked power, he quickly cleared the dungeon of blind goblins. Then he found the core and destroyed it. A new table appeared. He was congratulated on passing the practical test of the special exam for lower dimensions. Now he will be moved to the dormitory. Yuan expected to go home, and so he was surprised to find himself in a completely different place, a world he had never seen before. It was the United Academy. He found himself in a luxurious room, not understanding where he was. He was congratulated on passing the practical exam and being granted the status of a temporary student. The table stated that he should carefully put on the provided uniform and attend the interview. He had to wear the uniform of the United Academy. It seemed ridiculous to him. After all, he had just passed a deadly test, and now he had to be in a school uniform again. They almost killed him, and now they want to interview him? Yuan decided that he would definitely tell the person in charge of this. At the very least, he will demand compensation for such a brazen move. He opened the heavy door and saw a very pretty girl. She had green skin, and he couldn't tell if she was an alien, but she was certainly beautiful. The girl introduced herself, Yumina, Professor of Magical Combat at the United Academy. She congratulated him on passing the exam and told him that the entire faculty had watched him pass it. He was the first student in 500 years to create a new artifact during the test. He was transported here without knowing anything and almost died. But the professor was delighted. This was an exceptional case, even outside the framework of the special exam. Perhaps their worldviews differ because they are from different dimensions. This is a strange academy. He was about to leave after the interview, but after looking out the window, he changed his mind. He asked the professor what kind of column it was. She replied that people from the lower dimensions often do not know anything about the unification or the column. The column is the reason why the United Academy was created. Great talents from all dimensions are nurtured here, and they help them reach the summit tower, the last hope of all worlds. A dungeon among dungeons. The source of all the secrets and dangers of this world is the Tower of Babel. He realized this is what he had heard so much about. Everything they said turned out to be true. He remembered hearing about monsters infesting the tower, but it didn't matter. Ban Yuan will swear he will return the glory of his family and everything that belonged to his ancestors. Then he decided to enroll in the United Academy. Thanks to the professor's special attitude, he was temporarily returned home. He gathered the whole family and told them what had happened. Grandfather was happy. Finally, his grandson had found the Tower of Babel. Now he was in the lower dungeon of the Unification, inside the Hobgoblin Cave. Active preparation for admission has begun. He had fought the monsters, and now they were all dead. He walked calmly past. Finally, it all worked out. Before, he was limited only by his linguistic abilities, but now everything is different. The Babylonian Codex allows him to verbalize, absorb, and manipulate concepts of objects. Having defeated the enemy, he is able to recognize and master his concept. The more concepts he collects, the stronger he becomes. The concept was obtained in the first dungeon, the Cave of the Blind Goblins. He put it into his club, strengthening it and turning it into a weapon. Now this formidable weapon is the Bat, a mace imbued with ghostly energy, the first artifact created by Yuan. It opens on command, is capable of transformation and acting autonomously. The boy thanked the weapon and the lucky chance that allowed him to create it. This brought him a good result in the assessment. But now it's time to sort out the loot and check everything against the Codex. Among the concepts received from the sponsors, there was something new, the soul. He noticed that the weapon was behaving strangely and wondered what was going on. He asked the artifact if it wanted a new concept, and the weapon nodded yes. Of course it was going to do that. First, give him a little concept of the life of a ghost and spirit. Until now, even the smallest concepts he received, he transferred to his mace. Combined in perfect harmony, the concepts caused the transformation of the artifact. The concepts of Ghost 2, Beast 5 inches and Spirit 4 inches automatically merged. The ideal energy led to a fusion that went far beyond ordinary existence. The young man couldn't understand. Could it be that one of the concepts he had been using had suddenly transformed? Through transcendental fusion, a new entity, Ghost Beast 10, was completed, and a snake appeared before him. By combining the symbols for ghost and beast, he got Ghost Beast. It was like a fantasy. He decided to touch the snake. He just hissed in surprise. But he allowed himself to be stroked. His personality remained the same. The weapon is still capable of transforming into a magical gun or shield. At least the young man hoped so. After this, the snake bit his hand and the young man gave him a name, Eva. Now they must check the growth status before returning. Based on his experience, life is like a level in a game and seems to reflect physical characteristics. However, for some reason, his soul characteristic was especially high. His abilities such as all-seeing eyes, perfect pitch, and Babylonian mouth are possibly related to his limbic skills. Later he thought about Eva. Did she really think that now she would have the opportunity to surprise others? But it's okay. The main thing now is the pace. He has no intention of retreating and intends to return back to the entrance ceremony of the United Academy. There were several notices posted at the entrance to the academy inviting students inside, and they all headed there. Inside was a huge hall with chairs and a notice board. An important speech was about to begin. Yuan also appeared among the students. Many monster-like creatures immediately took notice of him. He noticed how many people had gathered there. Everyone sees him, and he sees everything too, thanks to his eyes, which are able to read the aura and spirit of the target depending on his skill. As expected, unlike him, who had special clearance for the lower dimensions. The ordinary students who got here through regular selection looked very strong, even at first glance. He wondered where his place was, but then his attention was drawn to a strange shadow behind him. Some students started saying that if he was from a lower dimension, then he shouldn't be here, and it would be better to just disappear. But he just muttered something and left. As expected, the students who had passed the regular selection had a high opinion of themselves and discriminated against him solely because of his background. Even here, those who have power and authority look down on those below them. At that moment, someone called him and pointed out that the special selection students were in a certain area. He saw 4 chairs standing apart from all the others. There were students from the lower dimensions sitting here, and it felt like they had been banished. But something strange about these guys caught his attention. Are they really specially selected students from the lower dimensions? Yuan remarked that their seats were simply amazing. The guy who called him turned out to be S-Light. He really seemed to radiate light. It was his cute roommate, whom he met in the dorm before the entrance ceremony. Their first meeting was unexpected. S-Light was in armor and threatened with a sword, demanding to know who he was. Then Yuan became very scared. He pointed to his clothes. Wasn't it obvious he was a freshman? The blonde, realizing the misunderstanding, apologized, explaining that he was a little nervous after the practical selection. Yuan noted to himself that this guy who looked like a prince from a fairy tale was quite hot-tempered. However, he was the first to apologize, so he wasn't that bad. The blonde man asked in surprise if Yuan had encountered anything difficult during the practical exam, since even a beginner who only knew the basics could easily deal with the goblins. Yuan admitted that they had gotten too chatty and he hadn't even had time to wash his face. Since arriving here, he hasn't really talked to anyone. Having started to undress, he was going to tidy himself up, and he asked where the shower was. S-Light told him to go first. S-Light was very embarrassed. This made Yuan a little embarrassed, and he didn't like this awkward feeling. Later, he approached the girl sitting next to him and said hello. She had light pink hair, and her hairstyle resembled cat ears. He noted to himself how cute she was and even blushed slightly. Then he walked up to the next girl. She caught his attention with her unusual eyes. The whites of her eyes had a grayish tint. The girl noticed a strange object wrapped around his hand, and I found it curious. Then Yuan realized that it was about the snake that was wrapped around his arm. Everyone immediately began to look at the animal with curiosity. S-Light realized that this was the same snake, the same artifact that was before, but now transformed. He was amazed at how Yuan had managed to change him in just a few days. One of the girls even asked permission to touch the snake. The white-haired girl introduced herself at that moment. Her name was Dokoyan, and she was the daughter of Master Murim. Yuan also introduced himself and asked if she used martial arts or created gusts of wind between her palms. Suddenly, everyone around laughed. The girl, blushing, covered her mouth, hinting that perhaps he was thinking correctly and was not mistaken. Yuan replied that if one were to accept the existence of fantasy, then there was no reason to doubt the existence of martial arts. Another girl introduced herself. Her name was Rushel. At that moment, they noticed Professor Yumina, and Eslight asked if she had had an interview yet. Yu-Wan confirmed that yes, and asked the same question himself. But their conversation was interrupted by a sudden blinding light. The ceiling of the auditorium began to open. Nobody understood what was happening. A loud and rough voice echoed through the hall, announcing that everyone was assembled. The students were frightened. Some grabbed their heads, others covered their ears. Russell began to tremble. Eslight tried to calm himself, squeezing his shoulders. Yu-Wan didn't understand what this incredible pressure was. And suddenly in the sky they saw something huge hanging over them. A giant eye announced the beginning of the 257th opening ceremony of the United Academy. The professor asked if they were impressed, since it was the rector's own speech. All the students from the lower dimensions were in Professor Yumina's office. Yu-Wan expressed admiration for what was happening. He wondered if the rector himself was really in charge of all this. The girl next to him was shocked. Did she really see that eye? The others couldn't believe that Yu-Wan dared to look up because most of the students were too scared. The creature completely hid itself in some special way. Yu-Wan couldn't understand how it was possible. His gaze was drawn to Dokgoyeon, and he noted that it felt as if a huge eye was looking straight at them. The professor explained that it was indeed the rector. They would probably never see him again unless they achieved something remarkable or caused a serious incident. It seems that a personal meeting with the rector is not a gift, but rather a curse. The professor laughed, noting that the students' successes were her successes too, and asked them to try harder. Eslight asked if she would be their leader, and Yumina confirmed this. One of only 9 professors in the entire academy became their mentor. It was truly amazing. She then formally introduced herself as Professor Yumina, a teacher of magical combat, appointed as their 11th grade class supervisor. The blonde was surprised, because usually students of their level are supervised by teachers of lower rank. The woman responded that such unusual students had been admitted this year that the responsibility had been placed on her. These students were truly extraordinary, so much so that one wonders what criteria were used to select them in the first place. While everyone was assembled, she gave them some advice. Be careful of envy and hostility from ordinary students. This caught Yu-Wan's attention. He realized that this was not just a competition, but possible physical clashes and conflicts between students. There were unspoken rules in the academy, in which even professors did not interfere. From now on, they, 4 specially selected students, must stick together. If they want to develop alongside others, they need to be strong enough to ignore other people's envy and hostility. Moreover, they are now partners who will climb the tower together until the end of their training. The woman announced the end of the conversation, saying that the academy had prepared gifts for them. She will explain all the details after they receive the artifacts. At that moment, the table in front of them lit up. Yu-Wan took out a necklace with a stone on it. It turned out to be their student ID card. With its help, they could enhance their abilities, gain access to all objects on campus, and even teleport throughout the entire territory of the association. Eslight appreciated the teleportation spell and was delighted by Professor Yumina. At that moment, they moved to another place. They were told that they needed to have their student ID with them if they wanted to get into the tower. Like it or not, they would have to keep a very close eye on this artifact. Russia was surprised why only Yu-Wan remained in the office. Another girl suggested that perhaps it was because he was the only one who was able to sense the rector's presence. A little earlier, when they were all sitting in the office, the professor was discussing tea drinking with someone on the phone. At that moment, Dokgoyeon thought that they were the only ones who were able to look directly at the principal. Meanwhile, Yu-Wan sat awkwardly at the table. It was his personal meeting with the rector, on the very first day. And yet it seemed he hadn't managed to get into any trouble. The rector said that Yu-Wan could look at him calmly. His true incarnation was not here. Then Yu-Wan saw in front of him a stuffed toy in the shape of a scarecrow with buttons for eyes. Yu-Wan didn't know how to properly address him, president or rector. However, he explained that he should be called master, and told why he had summoned him. Usually he does not interfere with the students' learning process. If they are weak, they remain weak. If they are strong, they become even stronger. Whether they die in the tower or survive and gain power and glory, he doesn't care. He has only one goal: to see someone reach the top. Everything else doesn't matter. Yu-Wan sat silently, not knowing what to answer. Strictly speaking, since the time of their ancestors, the Ban family has always sought to reclaim the tower, along with its power and glory. He was willing to risk his life for this purpose. However, he didn't know what the tower meant to the other students, and why they went all the way to get to the top. Then he turned to the master and asked what exactly the tower was. He was silent for a while and then replied that the tower was a test on the path to the divine. Yuan was amazed. The master added that this is why he does not interfere with the students' difficulties, but this time he makes an exception. He sees in the boy the greatest potential he has ever met. Using magic, the master caused the amulet to fly out of Yuan's pocket. He said that he would take steps to help him climb the tower. The guy couldn't understand what had just happened. The master extended his rights to research beyond the academy. Now he could go into any dungeon, but he had to remember to hone his skills before he began his ascent. The boy asked what he meant by outside the academy, but the master said that was all. And he created a round portal underneath him, which began to suck him in. Before he disappeared, Yuan heard that he had to improve his skills. If his successes are noticeable, new privileges will open up for him, including the ability to explore the tower alone. At parting, the master said that he would look forward to their next meeting. The guy appeared in another place and fell right on the professor. She asked how his meeting with the rector went. Yuan jumped back immediately, embarrassed. The woman explained that the rector always dismissed visitors like this and that he was quite a strange person. From the very beginning, he was waiting for Yuan. Her attention was drawn to the amulet, and from it she realized that Yuan had received permission to leave the academy grounds. The boy couldn't understand how important it was. The master said that he should develop the missing skills as soon as possible. The professor explained that this was of great importance. He could now freely go into the outer dungeons and visit cities outside the academy at will. This means that he will have much more experience in preparation than other students. It is unprecedented to give such privileges to an ordinary student. However, Yuan took it his own way, as if he was simply too weak and was assigned extra classes. The professor said that she was usually too busy to leave the academy at this time. Although the association is an academy, everything in it is created taking into account the interests of students, which is sometimes inconvenient for teachers. Yuan will now have the opportunity to explore dungeons and visit outer cities in his free time. He would be able to enjoy the local delicacies as much as he wanted, and that was why the professor admitted that she envied him. She even recommended a good outer city where the Spring Temple was located. After the meeting, Yuan went outside and remarked on how beautiful the weather was. The professor mentioned that the wine for newlyweds prepared by the temple priests was truly fantastic. It is famous for its sweet, fruity aroma, rich bubbles, and long aftertaste, and that is what she asked for. In any case, he should have been grateful for the expanded inventory. While looking through the contents, he noticed one item. It was the same bag his grandfather had given him when Yuan returned home briefly before enrolling. Then the grandfather asked his grandson if he had prepared well for the departure, and he handed him the bag, saying that at the most opportune moment he should open it and take from it everything he needed. When Yuan did this, he found that there was pure gold inside. He couldn't believe that he could actually use it. Grandfather explained that this was the legacy of their ancestors, who dedicated themselves to searching for the Tower of Babel. Now it all belonged to Yuan, and he had to dispose of it freely. The guy thought that this bag would be convenient to carry as equipment, and it fit perfectly into his gear. Grandfather also said that gold is valued all over the world, and he would only need to take a few bars with him. After this, he decided that the preparations were complete, and it was time to enter the new world. Even though it was another dimension, the cityscape seemed surprisingly familiar. However, when he saw flying cars and motorcycles in the sky, he realized that this place was actually very different. He couldn't take his eyes off the sky, trying to figure out how it all worked, when suddenly he was called from behind. He was approached by security guards who noticed that they had not seen him there before and asked who he was. Upon learning that he was a student of the United Academy, they greeted him. They were guards responsible for protecting the western border of the academic city. They asked how he got there and who gave him permission. Yuan explained that he had been given the right to freely explore the outside world. The guards said they understood. Thanks to the efforts of the rector and the staff of the academy, the city remains peaceful, and they are eternally grateful for it. As a freshman, he probably doesn't know much about the city and its structure, so they offered to help him if he needed it. It's part of their job, and they'll be happy to be of service. Yuan pointed to the flying motorcycle and expressed his desire to get one of them. The guards immediately looked up at the sky, and the guy himself asked how much they cost. Now here he is, riding his new vehicle. He steps on the gas and races across the field at breakneck speed. It reaches the cliff, bounces off, and continues flying in the air. And he really likes it. A little earlier, they had discussed with the guards that even the basic model costs 250,000 Roni, which is actually quite expensive. Yuan then showed them the gold bar, thinking that he could exchange it and buy a flying motorcycle. The guards were shocked by the sight of the gold. Where did he get such a huge bar? It turns out that one gold bar is worth 7.5 million Roni, and he thinks he should thank his grandfather for giving it to him without hesitation. At that moment, his pet snake crawled out and hissed something. The guy asked her what she thought, because by adding the spirit and the ghost, he turned the Gior hoverbike into an artifact. Her name is now Lilith, and they should get along well from now on. The hoverbike was created by the guy by merging the concepts of spirit and ghost, thus making him a living artifact and endowing him with a will, like a snake. Eve hissed happily. Now he has already bought wine for the professor and created Eve, a younger sister. He has done everything that was necessary and thinks that now it is time to return to the academy. Now he sits at the table with a pain in his head and doesn't know what to do. Someone put a glass of water next to him. They say that this disappointed him. Eslight can't believe that after their meeting he left without saying a word, and now he comes back with a hangover. He apologized, but the professor insisted and he couldn't refuse. It was the first time he got drunk. If he had said this earlier, then at least Eslight wouldn't have been waiting for him and worried. Dokgoyan noticed the badge on Yuan, the symbol of a class representative. He received it in exchange for becoming the professor's drinking buddy. The guy, in principle, is not against being a class leader, and Eslight said that Professor Yumina is responsible for them. If he was appointed, then this must be accepted. Dokgoyan suddenly declared that if anyone should represent the four of them, it should be her. After all, she is the strongest here. Afterwards, she asked Yuan if he agreed with it. Eslight interrupted them, saying that this was a strange way to express his thoughts. They were supposed to be equal comrades, but he felt that there was something that needed to be clarified about what she had said. Treating yourself as the best among them certainly doesn't feel right in the context of their future ascent to the tower. He also disagrees that the girl is the strongest among them, and she just smiles. Did he just say, equal comrades? She thinks it's funny, because he's the same person who asked the professor yesterday if students could go through the tower alone. The guy started making excuses, saying that he was just curious. That's all. It doesn't mean at all that he doesn't want to go on the team with them. Yuan thinks that there is hostility brewing between them, and from the very morning. He was going to say that they should at least discuss the plan beforehand. It looked like their group was already off to a rough start. In particular, he would not have wanted to be the class leader, but now he begins to understand why the professor chose him out of the four. Eslight is amazingly ignorant. His pride is ridiculously strong. Dokgoyan is incredibly self-centered and will definitely find enemies. And Rushel is surprisingly passive. She doesn't have the character to lead or educate others. Yuan was shocked. Could these really be the special selection students? Then he raised his hand and asked everyone to wait a second and calm down, to let him speak. The headman does not necessarily have to be the strongest. In fact, he does not have to be the strongest at all. If the strongest one becomes the headman, he will make all decisions independently at his own discretion. And a class monitor who is thinking about class unification should not do this. In any case, a class monitor should be average, someone who can offer a fair and reasonable solution for everyone. That makes sense. He thinks he's the most docile of them all. Dokgoyan, since it is the professor who has the right to appoint the headman as long as he agrees with his arguments. To be honest, the only person she really wants to lead is Yuan. But even if something is bothering her, if she wants to get what she wants, she will have to put up with what she doesn't need. After that, she leaves, and Yuan tries to calm his comrade down. He thinks this morning is something special. It feels like he's on a battlefield rather than at a university. It will take time to resolve the pride issue, and he should not rush into it. At this time, Rushel turned to him. She remembered the cute snake and asked if he still had it, because she wanted to touch it a little more. This place is full of hidden mines. The boy's first lesson as the class president of an 11th grade class filled with unique personalities started with difficulties. The creature, made entirely of stone, screamed that they were curious to know the abilities of people from the lower worlds. There was a galactic stadium. In the center was a man, and around him were benches where students sat. On one side there were only 4 people standing. This was Yuan's team. On the other hand, there are already student monsters. The judge said he thought the first lesson would start with light sparring and asked for the others' opinions. But the others started shouting, asking to be allowed to deal with these guys from the lower worlds. Everyone wanted to be the first. They even started fighting among themselves to see who would be the first to fight the humans. S-Light said that the combined academy divided the classes based on the remaining students' abilities. As expected, the first special class hates the 11th. Moreover, they thought that Yuan was wearing something provocative, which is what started it all. They demanded that he take off the brooch. One of the students was not happy that this weakling dared to wear Professor Yumina's, also known as the Flower Goddess, brooch. How can he have the nerve to wear that right in front of him? He will never agree to it. He then cried out, asking the professor to let him test Yuan's abilities first. The judge appreciated it and said it sounded good. Afterwards, he challenged the guy to a training fight with Ereto. Yuan got into a fighting stance, not at all afraid, preparing for the fight. The professor sat in her office and could not understand what was happening. Why are the students in her class participating in a joint meeting with the special class on the very first day? And from the very beginning, it's practice in real combat. There was simply no way that a specially selected student from the lower dimension could hold his own in a sparring match with someone from the upper dimension class. This is what she must have thought when the schedule was made. She doesn't know whose idea it is, but she senses malice in what is happening. At this time, Yuan raised his hand and apologized. He said his skills were still not good enough, and he didn't think he could learn anything from this fight. The professor thought for a moment and then said that he had -3 points to start with. The man said that he still needed to go out for sparring. This is not an excuse. Yuan couldn't understand what was wrong with this man. Why was he dragging him into this to humiliate him in front of everyone? He tried to explain that he was accepted as a specially selected student because of his unique abilities, not his combat skills. If he was interested in the abilities of a special selection student, wouldn't it make more sense to evaluate them differently rather than force them into a fight? The professor started shouting. Was he really going to teach him now? Whether it's a professor or a student, they all have to learn what they don't know. And anyway, isn't he Yumina's assistant? And another -5 points. Then the guy realized how he was going to play. After that, Yuan suggested the following. Consider this week as a preparatory one and hold the sparring itself next week. If only he could take a week off, enter the upper dimension once and come out. He thinks he will have time to complete the preparations. There was silence in the stadium. The other students couldn't understand what he said. What other sparring in a week and what preparations? What is he even talking about? His abilities are obviously at rock bottom. Does he really think he can prepare in 1 week? That he will have the opportunity to confront someone from a special class? The professor was angry. Now he simply ignores her and completely changes the schedule as he pleases. And yet she said that if that's what he wants, it sounds good. She announced that he and Ereto would have an official sparring match the following Tuesday. The format will be completely open and the entire academy will have the opportunity to watch the broadcast live. Therefore, they must prepare well. Yuan realized that the professor didn't just want to humiliate him, she wanted to make a big show out of it. The professor added that since he was the one who asked for the preparatory period, it would be better for him to show his abilities. He just turned his attention to Ereto and said that they would have an official match in a week, and that he is looking forward to it. Ereto found him very annoying. It wasn't that Yuan expected a polite response from him. His goals were different. He was interested in the all-seeing eyes characteristic he has. Depending on his mastery, it allows him to better understand the aura and spirit of the target. As expected from a special class, Ereto's stat values are ridiculously unfair. But even so, compared to his comrades, he is nothing. And in order to climb the tower with these guys, Yuan must surpass Ereto's level. He asked his friends why they were so gloomy. Were they worried about him? At this time, Dokoyun entered the field. Unlike the headman, she actually specializes in battles. She stated that she was interested in learning about the abilities of the special selection students, and she challenged anyone to a sparring match, saying that she was ready to accept any challenge. All the students looked at her with distrust and excitement. The professor was also in shock and did not know what to do. Yuan noticed how everything around him suddenly became silent at that very moment. Even his all-seeing eyes couldn't fully comprehend the extent of the girl's strength. It was impossible for the first-class students not to sense her overwhelming aura. Dogoyeon asked what was the matter. Should she really give up because of their lack of confidence? Then she called Ereto to her. She was sure that he was not one to back down, and he had to come out for her to crush him. However, he only became angry in response. Ereto must have been terrified. His original target was Yuan, but now he was being challenged by someone he didn't expect, and everyone around him knew it. If he tries to save face and gives in to the girl's provocation, he's finished. He will be so injured that he will not recover within a week. Not that he cared, but it shouldn't have happened, and he tried to stop the girl. He said that he already had a sparring match with Yuan scheduled for a week, and if she wanted to fight, she should wait for her turn. Yuan thanked her for standing up for him, but added that he didn't need it now. He must prove his worth by his own efforts. Dogoyeon thought he was just a guy who relied on tricks, but perhaps he has a little courage in him, and so she will let him have his way. She then challenged someone else to a fight and asked if anyone wanted to step up, but seeing that no one was getting up, she sighed tiredly. They were so loud just a second ago, and now, when a real threat has appeared, it's as if they've become rooted to the ground. Her comrades were waiting for her return. The rest of the students just silently clicked their tongues. At this time, one of the students, who was radiating powerful energy, said that he called people like them dogs. In his opinion, the weak and stupid always unite in flocks. They growl, pretending to protect their small groups. And this sight could not fail to please him. Yuan couldn't figure out what was wrong with this guy. Even among the students of the special class, he seemed like a bird of a completely different feather. Eslight explained that this was Ortima, the ruler of the dimension of Ketius. The guy didn't understand what exactly his friend meant and what they were talking about. He explained that excluding the unification, there are 10 upper dimensions, and Ortima is from the family that rules one of them, Ketius. It turns out that this guy belongs to one of the 10 most influential families in all dimensions. And so he entered the arena and was already standing in front of Dogoyeon. Afterwards, he turned to the teacher, and from that moment, the fight began. The professor took out a recording device. It was supposed to shoot video. Once the fight is over, he plans to share the recording with others via the intranet, although he's not quite sure what that actually means yet. Eslight asked if he even knew what an intranet was. Ortima replied that it was a network created by a company or an educational institution to exchange information. He came from the lower dimension and didn't even know about the unification, so how would he know about the intranet? Events developed in a similar direction. They came across a channel with recordings and broadcasts from classes that had already taken place. Later, they saw a live broadcast of the stadium where the action was currently taking place. It looks like the teacher really wants to embarrass them. However, Yuan doubted that events would develop exactly as the teacher expected. Dogoyeon studied the dark, dangerous aura, and Ortima emitted fiery steam and malice. They decided to start the fight. Dogoyeon said she would let him make the first move. The boy activated his power, adding that he wanted to see how far her arrogance could take her. Then he ordered her to kneel. But the girl just stood there with her hand outstretched. Her comrades were extremely surprised by this power. Yuan grabbed his hand, not understanding what was happening. This was completely different from the powers he controlled. The air around became heavy, like water flowing from top to bottom. It became difficult to breathe. All the students felt it. The sensation forced him to his knees, as naturally as if it were the only thing he could do. Everything that was happening resembled a distortion of the laws of nature. Eslight was amazed that his comrade had just figured out how this ability worked. At this time, Rushel, who had become very serious, grabbed the guy by the hand. She immediately noticed Dogoyeon's strength. She controlled her dark forces like a whirlwind. The rest were completely confused, not understanding what was happening. It was incredible how she just increased her energy and completely suppressed the enemy's power. Ortima assessed that it seemed that she was really capable of something. Dogoyeon asked if he was capable of anything at all, since his strength seemed as ridiculous as his horns. If this is all he can do, she is disappointed. Ortima replied that the fight was not over yet. However, at that very moment, the girl disappeared from the spot, and a few seconds later appeared in front of him, kicking him. Did he really think she would let it happen again? Apparently, the attack became stronger the closer he got. Now Ortima had to use both hands. If you lack intelligence, you need to train your body better. This is what Dongua said, appearing behind him. The guy turned around sharply to strike, but she immediately lunged downwards and grabbed him by the collar, after which she kicked him in the face because, as expected, all his movements were constrained and awkward. She mocked him. Should someone really feed him with a spoon? This enraged the enemy. He activated all his powers, scolding her and rushing to attack. A surprised Eslight watched all this. He couldn't believe what was happening. She was dominating Ortimus, the ruler of Kedius. Dongua crushed him without leaving him a second to think. Yuan noticed that it looked like Ortima was used to suppressing his opponent's actions and defeating them by distorting the laws of nature. But Dongua continued to strike blow after blow, giving him no respite. The method he relied on didn't work for her, which is why things are happening the way they are now. He has the power to suppress physical abilities, but he himself hardly moves. Eslight was surprised that Yuan could even see all of this. Dongua fighting equally with Ortima and the ban that befell them both. They are true students of special selection from outer dimensions. He wondered what was going on in this place. Ortima was clearly not happy with the way he was being defeated. How could some girl humiliate him like that? But in response to his indignation, he was again hit in the face. Dongua asked sarcastically if he had come here to show off, or if she should cut off his horns because they were too long. At that moment, the enemy activated a powerful attack, hit the floor, causing it to crack, and Dongua jumped back. An unusual halo appeared above him and he screamed, "How dare she humiliate him! He will never forgive her for this. If she wants to die, he will kill her right now." His eyes filled with fire. Dongua just looked at her opponent silently and a little surprised. After that, Dongua said that such words should not be spoken by a child like him. A vortex of dark power swirled around her hand, and she flew towards her opponent to crush him. Ortima also activated his power and moved forward, intending to kill. At that moment, Professor Yumina appeared and clapped her hands, saying that was enough. Both fighters stopped in complete shock. They couldn't move. They found themselves in an unusual place, a field strewn with many flowers. The professor said that the academy does not encourage students to fight to the death. She would have preferred that they leave it for the tower. The entire battlefield was covered with flowers, and petals were swirling in the air. The girl snapped her fingers and the whole illusion began to gradually disappear. Yuan didn't understand what was happening. Was it really an illusion? But everything seemed too real to be an illusion. He smelled a strong scent of flowers. Ortima clicked his tongue in displeasure and left the stadium. Dongua noticed that Professor Yumina looked pleased. She just smiled sweetly in response. Dongua then returned to her comrades and asked what it looked like from the outside. The guy replied that it was simply amazing. Even watching from the sidelines really helped. At that moment, Russell crashed into his back. They turned around and saw her shaking. Yuan realized that she was still scared of Donggua's power. He thought it was cute. She was standing there hiding behind him. But it was okay now. She didn't have to be afraid. At this time, Yuan heard Yumina screaming for punishment. She scolded the judge for pitting students against each other in sparring from the very first lesson, thinking he could get away with it, and simply watching as the situation spiraled out of control. Didn't he realize that it was a big mistake? He just awkwardly apologized. The girl told him not to even think that a simple apology would be enough. He should be prepared. She then walked up to Yuan and touched the brooch on his chest. She said that for a student leader, honor and dignity are important, so how come he wears his badge upside down? Other students watched all this. Yumina said that she was now going about her business and wished everyone a good day. Yuan sighed and realized that their professor had come to stop the fight. But in the end, it only made the situation more tense. After some time, the students sitting in the park were discussing that a girl from the lower dimension who had recently entered had fought on the same level as Ortima himself. Some said it didn't even look like an equal fight. The enemy was completely defeated. No one understood how this was possible because the girl was from the lower dimension. Others thought the newcomers who had recently arrived were simply amazing. Why were they all so cute? The situation seemed crazy. The gray-haired girl looked crazy, and people seemed to fall for newcomers just because of their appearance. Everyone watching the battle really liked Dongua. Everyone was delighted by her strength. Later, the way Yuan was talking to Farrell caught their attention. Then, everyone saw Yumina come out onto the court. She approached the newcomer, and everyone did not understand who he was and why he was entitled to such an honor. This caused discontent. Yu-Wan, reading all this, realized that the whole world was talking about them. Dokuyan couldn't understand. Wasn't this strange? Could her opponent remain promising? It seemed impossible. After all, there was another person in that class who was more capable than the rest. She thought Yu-Wan had a keen enough eye to notice, but he replied that he was too focused on her sparring. S-Light noticed that Ban was also mentioned in conversations. If they were afraid to talk about someone who challenged the best student, then they were taking it out on others. He also said that everyone was talking about it, but Yu-Wan remembered something else. Did they really sit so far apart before? Rushel sat alone to the side, trembling with fear. An awkward silence fell in the room. Rushel was afraid of Dokuyan and therefore could not approach her. Yu-Wan could not imagine them sharing the same room. He thought that maybe she was just nervous about what happened. Then he took something out of his inventory to cheer her up. After all, people always need a little something tasty. It was a concentrate of 1,000 fruits, a special elixir jam created by Yu-Wan's abilities. In addition to its amazing taste, it also increased stats. When his comrades did not understand what it was, he said that they would be very surprised and asked them for some bread. At that moment, Rushel was eating her loaf of bread. She was immediately surprised to smell a sweet aroma. Turning around, she saw the guy treating everyone to bread and jam. Dokuyan and S-Light immediately took a bite and were delighted with the taste. They were surprised how jam could be so tasty. Dokuyan said she had tried all the delicacies from the Central Plain, but this was on a completely different level. At this moment, Ban turned to Rushel, and he called her to him, noticing how she looked at him with appetite. She came up to me and asked me to make her a sandwich like that too. Then I ate the new delicacy with pleasure. The essence of the fruit gave the most delicious taste she had ever tasted. The rest of the comrades asked to make another sandwich like this for them. To Dokuyan, it felt like she was eating something too precious. But the guy replied that the jam wasn't too expensive, and since they were now a team, it was great to share something good. He added that this was his gratitude for the kindness that Dokuyan had shown him earlier. But the girl banged loudly on the table. She stood up, grabbed him by the tie, and said that in exchange for the elixir he gave her, she would personally teach him martial arts. They teleported together to another room. There was enough space to move freely. This training room probably reflected the psychological state. Ban came here without even finishing his meal. What was the girl going to teach him? She merely grabbed the wooden sword and warned him not to make any sudden movements. Then she got into a fighting stance, deciding that she needed to start with this first. And she went forward to attack. Yu-Wan didn't move, but the hairstyle on his head changed. Dokuyan explained that it was a stabbing blow, a movement completely without hesitation or doubt. It was hard to believe that this attack was carried out by a living creature. However, at that moment the guy noticed something. With his magical eye and wheel, he sensed a new concept, piercing. He wondered, why piercing? Isn't it closer to fencing? The girl pulled him out of his thoughts, reminding him to concentrate. A thrust does not exist on its own outside of a combination. Sword, fist, spear, an action that ends with a thrust can be part of anything. But now something else was important. She was showing him the most basic, fundamental essence of this blow. She demonstrated how often a thrust is delivered, where it comes from, what it imitates, and what intention is hidden behind it. There are countless options, but it is precisely this simple thrust that forms the basis, and he must not forget about it. The actions of Dokuyan, who had mastered one concept to perfection, were felt much deeper than several concepts mixed together. Perhaps for her this was the very essence of the thrust. The girl then gave him the sword, suggesting that he try an attack. Yu-Wan admitted that it would be a pathetic parody, but it was worth a try. If he could copy her movement perfectly the first time, it would mean that all her years of training had been wasted. And then he repeated this blow exactly down to the last detail. The girl was shocked. Was it really possible to immediately grasp the essence of a blow after seeing it just once? But Ban felt he had poor focus and could not fully replicate the movement. Until now he has been too focused on combining concepts, thinking that it is enough to simply strengthen them by combining or adding new ones. But he realized that he was capable of more. He felt hot and took off his jacket. His power may increase even more by improving what he already has. He thought, there are many symbols for stabbing. Why did he get caught in the piercing? because for Dongua, a thrust means hitting the target without fail. Then he dealt the fatal blow. The girl who watched this was very surprised. She stopped him, saying that there was no point in exhausting himself from the start, and Ban fell down exhausted. If he remembered what she showed him, he would have to use it when he had more space and an enemy to kill. At that moment, several signs appeared in front of him. He was able to raise his stats just by swinging his sword a few times. If only he had that kind of talent. Suddenly another sign caught his attention. His stats had increased dramatically. He had just learned the concept of piercing, and it had already reached level 16. Fencing, despite all the efforts and battles with goblins, has also grown, now to level 20. His combat stats doubled, which seemed unrealistic. The girl didn't expect his progress to be so rapid. Who would have thought that he would be able to demonstrate the essence of the technique even with a training sword? Ban said that it was nothing special. He just repeated after the girl and didn't really understand what he was doing. But she objected. If he could so easily pick up and repeat what he had just seen, why couldn't everyone do the same? The boy replied that perhaps it was because Dongua was a good teacher. After all, he didn't just say that. The first time he saw her move, he immediately felt its depth. He was amazed. Could anyone achieve such a level of mastery? He was so moved that he momentarily lost track of time. At these words, the girl blushed. They didn't even know each other well enough, and he was already saying such embarrassing things so easily. Anyway, the boy really enjoyed learning from her. Now she can keep the elixir for herself. The girl said that it was hardly worth her time, and then he admitted that he didn't know how he could compensate. She replied that there was no need to worry. She smiled and said that in time he would be able to compensate her for this loss. So he should be ready. The guy was a little embarrassed. Classes were about to start and it was time for them to go. Dongua was the first to teleport and disappeared from the room. Then the guy also started to disappear, thinking about what Dongua might really be like. At this time, Rushel was walking down the corridor, staring at her gadget. Suddenly other students stopped in front of her. One of them leaned against the wall, and he called the girl a beauty, after which he asked where she came from. The girl was very scared and didn't know what to answer. Suddenly someone's hand appeared in front of him. It was Eslight. He tried to defend the girl by saying that she was in the same group with him and asked what they were trying to get from her. The student who was addressing the girl shouted that the lowly ones from the lower dimension had imagined it, as if they could mix with someone, and tried to kick out Eslight. At that moment, Yuan and Dongua teleported towards them, which immediately attracted the attention of everyone nearby. The girl noticed that everything was starting just in time, and Ban asked what his comrades were doing. The students dispersed, discontentedly advising the boy to look around more often now. Rushel thanked the blonde for his help. Ban asked what was wrong with these guys and what happened. Later, they all ended up in class together. The teacher said that the history of the unification began on the initiative of the rector of the academy, from the moment when a tower appeared in the main dimension. At this time, someone from behind took a photo of Rushel, intending to add the photo to their collection. Another student added poison, saying that he didn't understand why a butterfly like her was planning to conquer the tower. He said that she should look for a more suitable occupation for herself. He added that if she worked for a student from an influential family, she would be spoiled there. Her friends sitting nearby heard the ridicule but remained silent. Ban realized that no matter where you are, there are nasty people everywhere. He wondered why the professor wasn't reacting in any way. Was he ignoring or not hearing what was happening? At that moment, Eslight stood up from his desk and turned to the professor, asking him to intervene, since some students were making noise and preventing him from concentrating on the lecture. The teacher turned around, confirmed that this was indeed the case, and addressed everyone, reminding them that they were not allowed to talk during the lecture and that they had to concentrate on the material. He then went on to talk about the period of unification. Some students immediately began to look at the blonde and began to insult him. They thought he was showing off just because he was cute, and it was because of him that they couldn't get Rushel's number. After that, rumors appeared that they were dating. The students began to discuss Rushel's appearance, her figure, and openly laugh. Eslight was furious. He squeezed his hand so hard that he broke the handle. At that moment, Yuan put his hand on his shoulder and urged him to calm down. He asked if he was really suggesting that she back down, despite everything they were saying about his classmate. Yuan replied that there was nothing that could be done in this case. Fighting would be stupid, and he didn't like getting involved in things like that. Causing trouble during class would only make things worse, and the boys decided they should just ignore it. Yu-won went to another app and noticed that there were other ways to solve the problem. He said that these students are talking about them behind their backs and will definitely get what they deserve. He chuckled and began broadcasting all the dirt they were saying in real time. On the column behind the students was his snake Eva, who was filming. People watching the broadcast immediately began to actively discuss what was happening, and everyone did not like it at all. The guy cleverly named the broadcast "The History of Unification" to subtly draw public attention to the situation. He was sure that he wouldn't let these guys get away with anything so easily for what they said about Russell. The students noticed the broadcast and started looking for the camera. One of them noticed a snake under the ceiling and pointed at it. They jumped up from their seats and tried to remove it. It is unclear how she got there, but the professor noticed all of this. He considered their behavior in the classroom outrageous. Last time they were disturbing, and now they were making a mess again. He demanded that they state their names and declared that they were being expelled from the class. 0. While they were trying to justify themselves, the teacher used magic to drive them out of the room. He added that he would give them bad grades until the end of the school year, and advised the others not to disturb the order of his classes and to listen carefully. Ban thought that 2s for everything they said was too few. It seemed too lenient. Aslight agreed. Russell replied that this was quite enough, and now she felt much better. She thanked them both for standing up for her. Ban admitted that he didn't do anything special because he's not as strong as them. He just thought about what he could do, and his idea worked. Aslight added that he felt more at ease knowing that Yu-won was their class leader. Later they found themselves at the stadium. Someone called Easelight. Russell was scared and hid behind Yu-won's back. The same students approached them, but now with weapons. Aslight asked what they wanted. The angry students demanded an explanation from Aslight for yesterday. Because of the broadcast of one of them, their grades for the semester dropped from the very beginning, and now even their classmates have started to avoid them. 3 students stood before Light, drawing their weapons. The teachers didn't seem to even intend to intervene. It seemed that the faculty did not consider students from the lower dimensions to be human at all. At that moment, Aslight said something to the students standing in front of him. They bared their teeth angrily and demanded that he repeat it. The guy noted that apparently they did not understand his words and repeated them. If they want to hear something, they should ask politely, because now they behave like savages. Hearing this, all 3 literally trembled with anger. One of them brought a sword to Aslight's face and declared that he had no right to talk to him like that, because he was just a non-entity from the lower dimension. However, Aslight immediately pulled out his golden sword, which began to glow. All his comrades were shocked by this sight. Yu-won didn't understand what exactly happened, but a message appeared in his table that a new concept had been discovered. The sword was ablaze with fire, a bright light shone around it, and pollen flew. The enemy was frightened, and Aslight asked if he hadn't told him anything. After that, he put the sword to his throat. He fell to his knees, and Aslight said that he was ready to speak only if he was treated politely. Yu-won realized that Aslight's behavior had become somehow different, as if the person had completely changed. He wondered if it was related to the sword, because a dazzling concept seemed to be bursting out from it. Aslight, pleased that the students had quieted down, he stated that now, having received the proper greeting, he was leaving. The guy, who had fallen to his knees, could not move his legs. He was paralyzed from the pressure. The rest of his friends started yelling at the students from the lower dimension and at Dokoyon, accusing her of how dare she do this. But she just looked at them silently. After this, Aslight turned to the teacher, and he asked what grade a group would get if they suddenly attacked their classmates with real swords during class. The teacher replied that the academy encourages unscheduled sparring. However, Aslight interrupted him, reminding him that he had not agreed to sparring. The teacher agreed, but added that Aslight had nevertheless exposed his personal artifact. The guy countered that he was merely reacting to an unprovoked attack. The teacher again noted that he had released his energy first, but Aslight explained that it was the only way to avoid damage. The professor merely apologized, saying that he had not noticed what was happening, which only angered Aslight even more. He activated even more power from his sword, not understanding how the teacher could ignore all of this. Could it be that all the words he is now saying were said seriously? At that moment, Dokoyon appeared next to him and gave him a flick on the forehead to calm him down. Slythe immediately grabbed his forehead and started yelling at the girl, and she said that he was too noisy. She reproached him for imagining himself to be all-powerful, waving his sword and behaving so arrogantly. After that, the sword in his hands disappeared. Yuan noticed the energy disappear, and the teacher, leaving, called the outer students insignificant creatures, accusing them of arrogance. Russell and Ban watched him go in silence. The guy then asked Rochelle if she thought all this was dangerous. Doggoyan scolded Eslight for screaming just because he had a divine weapon in his hand. Soon everyone was sitting and eating, and Yuan admitted that he had thought of something. If they continue like this, they will be treated badly at the academy. Eslight was surprised to hear such words from him, but Yuan reminded him that it was not he who was going to fight the professor, and even officially applied for sparring. Eslight explained that he wanted to improve the situation in the same way that Yuan had done before, but ended up almost causing serious trouble. Yuan started laughing because his comrade first spared the provocateurs and then immediately wanted to fight the teacher. Eslight tried to justify himself and even cried a little, which made Yuan think that he was going crazy. He realized that if this was Eslight's normal state, he would not have acted so recklessly. It was as if someone had flicked a switch and the man had suddenly changed. He then asked him to be honest, and whether he was able to control the power he had demonstrated earlier. Light replied that of course he could, otherwise he wouldn't have passed the entrance exam, and then he was simply angry because of the professor's behavior. Ban realized that everything happened because of the teacher, and he agreed with it, because lying is bad. He asked if Eslight could be trusted to truly control his power. Light promised he wouldn't cause any more trouble. Doggoyan interjected and admitted that she was glad to hear that, but she was still curious to see how the divine item would smear him. Russell noticed that Doggoyan wanted to scold Eslight even more, but then Doggoyan turned to Yuan. She began to understand the advice the professor had given them a few days ago, on the importance of being careful with the envy and hostility of other students. If they continue like this, the situation will become even more tense, especially if they are really thinking about their future. Doggoyan added that if Yuan had any thoughts on the matter, she wanted to hear them right now because it was important for her to know what he was thinking. Recently, Yuan clearly realized the reason for his anxiety. He began to understand that the way of thinking of those around him was based on inner strength, a sense of superiority, and an incomprehensible contempt for the lower dimensions. Over the years, the university has developed a system in which this is considered the norm, that outsiders can act in a certain way because it is commonplace for those around them. Then he asked his friends a question. What do they think is necessary to establish mutual understanding or gain acceptance from a large enough group? Light assumed it was talk. Doggoyan assumed it was power. Ban stopped them and said that they already had what they were talking about, they just didn't realize it. He meant the way they looked. Yuan suggested creating a channel dedicated to their daily lives. Ban agreed, saying that on Earth, where he comes from, it was a common and effective way to introduce oneself. They decided to create their own image that would introduce them to others, make them recognizable, which over time could develop into respect and even honor. Eslight doubted, if the main thing for them was admiration and respect, then why arrange a sparring match? Ban replied that this was not a show at all, but simply sparring according to the rules, which should be taken seriously. Light was surprised to be suddenly addressed with such seriousness and attempted to strike Doggoyan, but she easily evaded it, saying that Ban didn't have to worry. And she grabbed the blonde by the collar, after which she threw it, explaining that in sparring people become more serious, especially after taking a couple of hits. Their fight was watched by Russell and Ban, who was filming everything. Light, beaten, rose from the floor, clutching his head. Doggoyan asked if that was all he could do, and admitted that she now understood why he was so obsessed with that strange artifact. She allowed him to use it if he wanted, but doubted it would help close the gap in their powers. Light was furious, and Yuan was happy, because that was what they wanted. Russell asked if he really thought that this would make their lives easier. She still didn't understand, but he replied that it wouldn't change everything at once, but it would have a certain effect. If those who hired them before had known in advance what they were capable of, they would have thought 1,000 times before approaching them. Eslight dealt a crushing blow, and the ground beneath him split open. In any case, Ban and Russell shouldn't jump to conclusions because in Ban's opinion, her beauty is too valuable for her to worry about. He noted that a pretty face with a smile looks even better. Wherever she is, with such a face she can conquer anyone, and it would be a real waste if she frowned. So he advised her to put her worries aside and just enjoy the moment. Russell found it strange that no matter what he said, she still had the feeling that this was exactly how it would happen. At this time, Dokgoyeon walked towards the blonde man with full determination, asking where he was going, since she was just warming up. Eslight responded by asking for mercy, since she was not human. After that, they went to eat. Russell was upset. According to her, it was impossible to eat, because everything tasted like soap. It was noodle soup with lots of cilantro. Ban kept filming it, saying that nothing would happen to her and that she would get used to it in time. Following the suggestion, 11th grade students started uploading videos of their daily lives. The creation of a channel called Uprising blew up the entire intranet. Everyone began actively commenting on the battle, admiring the fact that the first years were already so strong. It seemed incredible. The guy looked like a sissy, but he fought very well. Later, they discussed a video where the kids were playing a board game, moving pieces around the board according to the rules. They also discussed how they sat in Professor Yumina's office, saying that they wanted to be in the same class. It seemed like that office was filled with models. Many looked at Russell with admiration, noting how cute she was, as if straight from heaven. And then we came across an announcement of the broadcast and noticed the date. She must pass tomorrow morning. But tomorrow is the day of the tower's conquest. The students from the lower dimension watched the public's reaction and couldn't believe what was happening. The channel already has over 1,000 subscribers in just one day. It was a huge success. Yumina came up to them and said that it was really cool. The unification is a higher dimension, full of miracles, where miracles are perceived as ordinary. No one has thought of making content on this before, but their channel and the atmosphere they created fit the definition of ordinary miracle. To create such a connection is something she would never have thought of on her own. Today was the first day of going into the tower, and everyone should have known that. Yumina asked if they were well prepared. Ban noticed that everyone was dressed up, but he was the only one in a student uniform. As one battle follows another in the tower, everyone dressed in a way that would make them comfortable to fight and feel safe. Yuan remembered that the place he lived in before was peaceful, and there were no special clothes for fighting. But this is the life he has chosen, a place where he must fight and risk his life. And so he said that his outfit suited him completely. Yumina realized that everyone was ready and created a magic circle for teleportation under them. A flash of light illuminated the academy and they disappeared. Together they appeared near the tower, next to other students waiting for their assignment. Everyone immediately recognized the guys from the Vostani channel. Russell began to look around in fear, especially at the entrance to the tower. Yumina explained that the tower was open from dawn and entry was based on level. They were assigned to the second-year level. Eslight noticed some students. They were the ones who had been causing them trouble earlier. But now it seemed like they were looking at them differently. Ban pointed out that they were also subscribers to their channel. However, Dokgoyeon noticed one who was looking at her with the clear intent to kill. Today was supposed to be the trip to the tower, and in 4 days, the duel with Ereto. During this time, Ban calculated that he would reach a level that Ereto would not even be able to reach. Yumina noted that from a safety standpoint, it would be better to return before the weekend, but that decision must be made by the participants themselves. She asked how long they thought it would take to conquer the tower. Ban asked his comrades if they were thinking the same thing. They eventually decided that they would need 2 nights and 3 days. A mini-robot appeared in his hand, and he confidently said that they would return on time. They went to the tower, and the professor wished them luck and asked them to take care of themselves. Ban mentally turned to his ancestors just to have them look at him and wait. Earlier, the professor asked Ban if he was going to film inside the tower. He replied that yes, he wanted to capture everything that would happen there. This will be done by a mini-robot, an artifact with a personality, created like Eve or Lilith. Yumina clarified whether he really thought the filming would be useful, since the tower is primarily distinguished by its continuously changing structure. Eslight agreed. If you read the manual, it says that the internal structure of the tower is constantly changing, and the equipment deteriorates very quickly. Each floor is called a room. When the party defeats a monster or clears all the traps in a room, the space itself transports them to the next one. In the unification, this unique structural change is called a shift. The more shifts a group undergoes, the deeper they descend into the tower. After clearing, a shift occurs, and they can never return to the same room. The new room will contain different monsters, stronger than the previous ones, as well as more complex traps. Dokgoyeon, while drinking tea, asked what would happen if someone died while climbing the tower. Ban wondered the same thing. What would happen if one of his friends died in battle? He realized that he had almost forgotten the most important thing. The professor noted with a smile that this was indeed an important question. In most areas of the tower, test subjects do not actually die. Even if death occurs, they are thrown back to the entrance of the tower. Their student ID records their progress, so the next time they log in, they pick up where they left off. This is exactly why they need a student card, and it should not be lost under any circumstances. Eslite asked if he could resurrect himself. Did that mean he could keep trying? But Dokgoyeon recalled that it said, "in most territories." So there are places where subjects can actually die. The tower does not guarantee complete safety. Yumina praised the girl for her attentiveness, and she confirmed, yes, in some exceptional cases, death can be real. After that, the entire team found themselves inside the tower, and she entered into battle with the slime, Klausither, an infamous monster that devours all the explorer's equipment. Eslite cut the slime into pieces with his sword. Dokgoyeon pushed them away with a snap of her fingers. At this time, Ban tried to do something with the fire, but nothing worked. The concept of fire was clearly there, but it was impossible to extract it. In the dungeons, there were no such problems before, but in the tower, the abilities stopped working. Understanding the reason for this failure may be the key to unlocking his abilities. Dokgoyeon approached him and reminded him that he had asked for time to figure it out. She asked if he had understood anything. Bang replied that he had tried to put out the flames, but it hadn't worked. The girl notices what is happening with annoyance. If Ban had succeeded, they could have used the features of each location in the tower. However, Yuan asked her to moderate her fantasies about his abilities. At this moment, a huge slime appears behind her, ready to attack. But the monster is stopped by some kind of magical chain. The girl understands. This is how artifacts with personalities behave in battle. It was Yuan's living weapon that saved her. The artifact released even more chains and destroyed all nearby monsters. And then he walked around the entire room, destroying the slime. Dokgoyeon noted that it was fast and high-quality work. Ban replied that he had even stronger artifacts, but they were not as noisy. Dokgoyeon was surprised. Could there really be people even noisier than their comrades? In the dungeons, combat is all about stealth and avoiding detection, and now they're going all out, and it looks ridiculous. But Rushel's fighting style is built on raw instinct. During the fight, Eslite and Rushel scream very loudly, and it is too noisy. However, in the first room there were only slimes, and they had no problems with such monsters. A dark cloud began to gather around Dokgoyeon. She warned him not to relax, because as soon as Light said this, energy began to accumulate in the air. A stronger enemy was about to appear. Light suggested that it might already be an elite monster. The guy turned to Yuan, but before he could say anything, he already understood everything, and used the seeing eye. Then he turned to Rushel, and she immediately noticed some limbs. A wall with a carved and glowing sign appeared in front of them. Rushel suddenly jumped up and rushed towards her to destroy her. She released her claws, her eyes filled with fire. She crashed into the wall, destroying it with her hand. Her comrades observed this and were extremely surprised. Light noted that it was incredible. Rushel didn't even let the monster appear, and after her blow, an improved core fell out. Rushel was breathing heavily as she stood there. And then she reached out and grabbed the core. Ban immediately noticed that something had happened to her hair. The girl held the artifact and did not understand what exactly was wrong, but her hair changed color. The boy realized that it was a forge or some kind of hearth, a concept that used emotions as fuel, burning them to gain power. In other words, berserker. If the hair changes color completely, then the scene from the past begins to make sense. He was pulled out of his thoughts by Rushel, who took him by the sleeve and asked if she had just looked scary. But Ban just smiled and said that not at all. She looked reliable. Dokgoyeon noticed that everything was fine and asked why she was so worried. But if she is afraid of losing control of herself, then she must be sure that Dokgoyeon will kill her before she harms anyone. Ban stopped them, saying that they couldn't do that. If someone died, they would have to start exploring from the very first room. However, if you continue in the same spirit, the conquest of the tower will have to be completed by 3 people. Despite this, the girl admitted that she would prefer to remain in the group with only Yu-Wan. Light objected, asking what about him. Russell stood to the side, looking down and remaining silent. Yu-Wan touched her shoulder and said that he would definitely think of something. Now he understood why the girl was so timid. As the headman, he felt responsible for finding a solution. The girl thanked him, but he replied that it was okay. It was part of the headman's duties. Suddenly they found themselves in another room and realized that there had been a shift. Now the second room was beginning. Eslight dropped to the floor and began to feel the ground. Apart from the moss and weeds growing here, he didn't find much difference from the previous room. The elite monster core that Russell had previously given to Ban was now in his hands. He looked at the artifact's stats. All the time he'd spent in the dungeons had been in vain. He got so many concepts from one room. It was like he had gone through the Goblin Cave 10 times. Acid and fusion are attributes that have the properties of dissolution. He decided to soak his sword with fusion. He would give the remaining acid to his snake, Eve. Dokoyan appeared next to him and asked if the baby had really become stronger so quickly. Ban was very scared and asked her not to sneak up on him and not to talk to him in that tone. She replied that if he trained better and developed his senses, it would be harder to scare him. Eslight interrupted their conversation, saying that the monsters of the second room would appear soon. They at least need to look collected. At that moment, a beam of light flew past him. Dokoyan noted that the second room felt little different from the first. An evil spirit appeared next to them, a harmful entity that targeted the magic inside living beings. Eslight told Dokoyan that this spirit would attack her just when she least expected it. The girl allowed herself to make a suggestion. She suggested that Ban conquer the second room on his own. Yu-Wan was very surprised. Eslight asked why she suddenly decided that, and Russell began to worry because it was too dangerous. Dokoyan, on the contrary, supported the idea. In her opinion, this is a great option. The guy needs to reveal his abilities as quickly as possible, especially with the sparring he has coming up next week. Isn't that obvious to anyone? Yu-Wan laughed nervously, saying that she was indeed unusual. She had started making strange jokes lately. Then he rolled up his sleeves and asked to be given a chance to try to figure it all out. As the girl said, he needed to quickly raise his stats, and it would be a waste of effort if the entire team fought here. He asked the others if they would help him close the gap as soon as possible. Russell said that if he asks, she trusts him. Eslight added that he would intervene as soon as the situation became even slightly dangerous. Yu-Wan turned to Dokoyan and asked if she would help him if he ran out of steam. She replied that at least she promised that he definitely wouldn't die from overexertion. This is exactly what Ban wanted to hear. He activated his power. He called his assistant, the snake Eva, over whom a magic circle immediately appeared. She instantly turned into a weapon that could be fired from a distance. The guy gave the command and the gun started shooting. All the evil spirits screamed in pain. Russell and Light watched the scene, not understanding what kind of weapon it was. Could it be a normal weapon from Yu-Wan's world? The blonde didn't know his strength, but the speed with which he defeated monsters was amazing. I wish at least his country's soldiers were armed with something like this. The blonde wondered if this was a rapid-fire launcher. But no, the weapon continued to fire, now with metal pellets. Ban could handle third-class assassins and possibly second-class ones too. This item would be useful even in the world of martial arts. But the attack style was too straightforward. It works well in long-range combat, but in a tight space there can be many threats, such as an enemy attacking from a blind spot. It was at this moment that an evil spirit appeared behind Yu-Wan. His friends immediately noticed this and rushed to his aid. But Ban himself still didn't understand anything, turning around in surprise. Yu-Wan immediately had a sword in his hands and used it to cut down the enemy. Russell and Eslight looked at him in surprise, and the boy asked what kind of sword it was. It was a long blade with excellent stats in assassination magic, blood poison, and fusion. No one expected him to be so good with a sword. Ban noted that this is not entirely true. He is not yet as good as Light or Dokoyan. Dokoyan just smiled silently, remembering their early training. Ban's living weapon continued to fire, and he himself cut through the enemies with his sword, tearing them to pieces. He shouted that he was continuing to study. After the battle was over, he said that no more new enemies were noticeable. It seemed that this was the last monster. Then he summoned his artifact, Eve. Since the next shift would occur after the last enemy was destroyed, they needed to take a break. He bound the last spirit, Dokgoyeon crouched down on the floor and touched the liquid left by the monsters. The severed body parts melted and disintegrated. Yu-won used a skill he had only learned in the previous room. Given the recent events and the way he was wielding his sword now, it was clear that he had never lived in battle before. But for some reason he was learning very quickly. Light praised him for his ability to control his actions. Dokgoyeon also praised, saying the final blow was excellent. If only he wasn't so focused on quick sword strikes, but still it's much better than being a fool who has a sword but no brains. While Light and Dokgoyeon continued to quarrel, Ban stuck his hand into the portal. And he took out a soda from there, saying that his comrades were really something. He took a sip and decided to rest a little, but noticed that his comrades did not look tired at all. Their attention was drawn to the fact that he was eating or drinking something alone. Russell noticed a fragrant smell and a hissing sound. Ban explained that this thing could be bought in the city. Light reminded that only he can go outside the academy, and the others do not have such an opportunity. Ban said that even if he wanted to share, he couldn't because he hadn't bought much. It was a lie, and besides, the drink was only effective when you were tired. Dokgoyeon asked when he had gotten tired, but he still declared that he would take the third room for himself. Ban reminded him that wasn't she the one who said that he had to protect everything alone to become stronger. She replied that she wanted to get tired too, to taste the sweetness of a drink she had never tried before. In any case, they had not rested enough and had to move on to the next room. Then the last evil spirit was killed. A circle of light immediately appeared around them. The shift had begun. Ban closed his eyes and looked through his internal code. He was amazed. With such characteristics, he was already at the average level in the academy. During the time he had been here, he had swung his sword a little, and the fencing and piercing skills he had just begun to learn had already improved. With such efficiency, it is worth focusing on fencing because sparring is scheduled for next Tuesday. Its outcome depends on how much he can increase his martial arts stat. The difference between it and Ereto is over 200 points. Frankly, there is no way he can close that gap in ability in just a weekend, no matter what he does. However, while training in martial arts under Dokgoyeon, he caught a hint. Acquiring skills is important, but so is improving them, especially when it comes to developing martial arts. If only Dokgoyeon could teach him one more move. But he immediately interrupted his thoughts, realizing that it was wrong to think like that. No matter how strong she is, it should not upset the balance in the relationship. So he took his time and just thought because he still had time. At that moment, Light ran up to him, shouting that he had to get out of there. Ban's thoughts immediately retreated. He realized that he was falling somewhere, but he did not understand what was happening and why he was falling. Russell was flying down next to me, screaming in fear. Ban couldn't understand how it was possible that the floor just disappeared. Ban saw millions of spears with sharp tips sticking out of the floor below him. Yu-won immediately summoned Ava and a chain appeared. She turned around Russell and stopped her fall a few centimeters from the spikes. Ban himself hung from a chain, holding on with one hand while simultaneously holding Russell, who thanked him. The boy couldn't understand what had happened. Was it an unplanned shift? Why is the room so big and with a trap at the bottom? Dokgoyeon turned to Yu-won, telling him that he needed to hurry up. The girl was standing on the ceiling, and Ban didn't understand how she got there. She warned him that if he stayed where he was, he would die. The guy didn't understand what she meant, but then a sound was heard behind him. More spears began to emerge from the wall, and they all rushed towards Yu-won to wound him. He didn't know what to do because he couldn't just let Russell go. Seeing no other way out, he called upon Eve again, and a portal appeared. Ban jerked the chain sharply, and Russell flew to the other side of the room. He himself flew to the side, and the spears did not have time to touch him. Then he caught Russell in his arms and asked if everything was okay with her. He apologized for the rough treatment. It was too dangerous, and he had no choice. They found themselves on a flying motorcycle, and he told the girl to hold him tighter. At this moment, more spear traps appeared. At the same time, Light fought off the flying weapon with his sword. Golden wings appeared behind his back, destroying all attacks with one blow. He didn't understand what was happening. During the briefing, the professor said that the traps don't appear until the 20th room. But now they are only in the 3rd, and the difficulty is already completely different. Light notices his friends on a motorcycle and wonders with interest what Ban has summoned this time. Ban tries to dodge, but they are being shot at from traps wherever they go. Russell sits behind him and silently watches what is happening. She remembers how Yu-won held her tightly after she fell, and she presses herself closer to him, hugging him. Ban blushes, not understanding what is happening. At that moment, an arrow hits the motorcycle. They continue to drive away, but the weapon still follows them. They notice Light, who asks what they are doing here, since he was doing a good job of dodging. He then asks what they summoned, but before hearing the answer, he states that he too has a question. What are they riding on? Could this really be a hoverbike from Ban's world that he's never seen before? After that, he asked where Dokgoyan was. Light realizes that he hasn't seen her in a long time and that she may have fallen into a trap. However, the girl at this time was jumping from wall to wall, skillfully dodging all the weapons. Ban doesn't believe that she could have fallen into a trap so easily, and he assumes that she is simply observing what is happening somewhere nearby. Light didn't know what to do next and how this chaos with traps would end. Ban replies that according to the manual, they need to hold out for a while. He doesn't know exactly how much or how it works, but now Light should run in the other direction, and he himself will analyze the traps. More traps are activated, but for some reason they all seem to be targeting Light exclusively. Ban concludes that the trap's priority is likely moving objects. He realizes that they shouldn't have moved at all during those moments when they were in danger. At this moment, he notices the arrow and gets angry because one of the weapons still managed to wound Lilith. He pulls an arrow out of the body of the triangular motorcycle and says that everyone needs to be informed immediately. No movement is allowed unless necessary. But if they stop moving, they won't be able to get through the room. At that moment, the arrow in his hand begins to evaporate. He is very surprised and does not understand what is happening. Did he just absorb magic and briefly study its concept? Then why couldn't he read anything in the first room? What had changed? He suggests that the reason is that he has enhanced his stats. But then he thinks it might just be a coincidence. Seeing the sword, he decides that he will not know the truth until he checks it. Everyone watches what is happening, including a surprised Rushel. Ban again cannot understand what is happening. The sword in his hands is falling apart. He acquired the concept of decapitation. But why did it work on the sword? If you think about it, he saw something different from what he had seen before. At this time, he notices Light trying to dodge but is already almost completely in the water. He let himself down, thinking that it was only the traps that he had to worry about. Who would have thought that they would also spill water? Something had obviously been mixed into the water. He felt his body growing heavier, his vision blurring. If this continues, he won't be able to react in time to the next trap. Ban activates his motorcycle to save his friend. He leaves Rushel and heads towards Light. He had previously apologized to her for what he was about to do. He explained that it was some kind of lottery and he couldn't drag her into it. He asked her to wait there. As expected, learning this concept increased his parameters, acid and wave, by 10 units. As before, he touched the water but acquired not water but a wave. Now he understands why before, when he absorbed the concept, it was beheading and not sword. At this time, Dokgoyan jumps from one pole to another, and she stops. Her attention is drawn to Ban. She sees him cutting through the water to help his friend, but she doesn't understand what he's planning. The state of matter at a given moment determines which concept can be acquired. That is why the projectiles aimed at his neck carried the concept of decapitation and not sword. Several projectiles fly towards Light. Ban says he'll handle it himself. The deeper his all-seeing eye becomes, the further he can penetrate beyond the essence. Light sees his comrade jump over him on a motorcycle, trying to stop the attack. Ban holds his hand out, confident that he can discern the intent of the projectiles fired by the traps. He activates his all-seeing eyes. After each weapon, magical signs with hieroglyphs begin to appear, and Ban decides that he can read them. Light is greatly surprised to realize that his comrade is heading straight into a trap. Ban fights back, but he doesn't have to absorb everything. As long as he is able to combine these elements and separate them into parts, that will be enough. Then symbols appear on the floor and a sound wave runs around him. He stops happily because his task is completed. All the weapons around him have been absorbed and disappeared. Rushel puts out his hands and catches the pollen left behind by the weapon. A friend runs up to Yuan asking if he is okay. He replies that, except that everything is fine with Light, and they barely got there. Light notices something in his comrade's hands and asks what it is. He replies that it looked like everything that was flying at them had merged into one. It felt like something amazing. The blonde wondered if he had tried the new ability, the ability to interact directly with traps, because that was a real specialty. At this point, New traps appear and weapons fly towards them again. Just then, Dokoyeon and Rushel fly over them, repelling all attacks. Dokoyeon says that if they don't correct this ridiculous habit, they will get into serious trouble one day. Ban thanks the girl and she replies that he's been in trouble before and let his guard down again. But it looks like this was the last trap. Light asks what kind of relationship this is. Aren't they communicating too freely with someone who almost died? They continue to bicker, and Yu-Won thinks that they actually get along well. No matter what they say, when things get dangerous, every single one of them rushes to help. Dokoyeon says that she was waiting for the right moment because one day when she needs it, she will definitely remind her of the debt she acquired today. They teleport together to the 4th room. Ban notes that the ceiling here is lower than usual, and at least they won't be attacked from above like they were before. He hopes so and immediately activates his weapon. Banu shoots at the spiders that are approaching them. The guy is very surprised, not understanding what kind of monsters these are. These were tower spiders, unique monsters that can appear on any floor regardless of level. They repelled all attacks. Light explains that the spider's stats are randomly generated, and it seems that his weapon is not effective enough. They will continue to fight, but it looks like Dokoyeon will have to intervene this time. Yu-Won can't believe that such powerful monsters have already appeared. Dokoyeon steps forward and covers Yu-Won with her hand, telling him to stay behind her. He must watch carefully. This is exactly what he was looking for all this time. The girl uses wind gust magic. A huge wave engulfs the opponents, sending them flying to the other end of the room. This blast seems more powerful than Eve's bullets knocking out most spiders. Dokoyeon suggests that Ban finish off the remaining monsters. Then she asks if there is a ruler more merciful than her. Ban just smiles a little nervously. He tells Light to cover the rear and Rushel to watch the horse in case of a surprise attack. A sword appears in his hands. Dokoyeon is not his ruler, but he did not expect her to be so considerate. The spiders make strange sounds and come closer. How can he not be grateful for this? And attacks one of the spiders. His comrades are watching him. Yu-Won stands in front of the spider, pointing his sword forward but trembling. He can't break through it. The spider is too hard. The monster's eyes begin to glow aggressively. The spider jumps towards the guy intending to attack. But even in such a situation, there is always an opportunity to strike. He hits the spider with his hand right in the face. His friends are happy because they managed to win. However, if the enemy can't be cut down, then everything is pointless. He can't just keep hitting and retreating, especially when there are so many spiders around. Looks like the tower spiders are still too strong for Ban. He already had something valuable from the previous room, and he didn't even think about using it. But now is the best opportunity. He connects the sphere in his hands with the sword. Artifacts evolved due to excellent compatibility with the owner. Now he has a long sword bearing the name of the executioner. A huge pile of spiders rushes towards the guy while he tries to fight back with his sword. And so he decides to use his new weapon. It delivers a devastating blow, cutting through the spiders. Light is shocked. He doesn't understand how he managed to do this. Ban notices that the blow feels different, as if he had landed a clean blow. But it feels like I swung harder than I needed to. He decides to try again and do it right. Light comes to the conclusion that there are too many spiders and they must help their friend. Dokoyeon notes that what he did with the sword was definitely something special. In a short moment, he was able to cut through enemies he couldn't even touch. How is someone capable of such intuitive, vague, and seemingly irresistible abilities? He hones his skills without relying on strength alone. Usually, when someone upgrades their weapon or finds a new one, they start waving it around uselessly. But he doesn't have that drawback. Even if not now, someday he will comprehend the true essence of the slashing blow on his own. Dokoyeon sees no point in interfering, but she feels that leaving everything as is would be a waste of opportunity. After overcoming 3 tribulations, she was proud to be called the greatest genius in the martial arts world. And now she just stands there and looks at the man who makes her past seem insignificant. And she doesn't intend to let it go that easily. She has to make this guy hers. Ban suddenly stops, horror written across his face. Light asks if everything is okay, but he replies that he just got goosebumps. He then asks why Dokoyeon is just standing there and isn't she going to use the gust of wind. He is told that she is doing just fine as is. Then maybe he shouldn't give her the sugary drink since she did it all herself. He runs off to get some soda, saying he'll only share with Rushel and Light. At this time they receive an external message. Right now this notification comes, but Rushel does not react in any way. It says that they all need to leave the tower. No one understands what is happening. This is a personal message from the rector to all students, and no one likes it. Dokoyeon hasn't even had time to warm up yet. She hasn't received her sweet drink, and until there's an explanation, she's not going to believe it. Russell, who had been standing motionless until now, begins to growl and says that someone is approaching. Everyone immediately reacts to her strange reaction. They see a huge number of spiders and begin to understand why they were told to return. Now it becomes clear. This is what was discussed at the meeting. It is not surprising that the difficulty of the floor was not determined in advance. Dokoyeon takes his student card, but there is no signal. She says the device has stopped working, and they are now completely cut off in this room. From the huge portals, many spiders with nasty paws burst out. This is the very phenomenon in which even students can die. A huge flock rushes towards the students. With claws and swords, they are ready to fight, despite the spatial heterogeneity. Earlier, the professor spoke about the possible likelihood of a spatial pirate invasion, especially when newcomers gather in the tower. The problem is that their anomalous invasion leads to the emergence of an unpredictable phenomenon: irregularity. As a rule, during a normal playthrough, no one dies. But as soon as the situation becomes unusual, everything changes. The rules of the tower are turned upside down, safe zones become dangerous. The number of monsters begins to grow uncontrollably. The difficulty level of the rooms increases dramatically. At the same time, many other problems arise. The tower can no longer guarantee safety, and that is why such phenomena must be kept in mind. If they ever realize that they are facing an irregularity phenomenon, they should know that this is indeed an extremely dangerous situation. Together they break out into another room, because it will be more spacious there. Nobody knows how long they will have to fight off spiders. Therefore, staying in a cramped space is too risky. The spiders are already running down the corridor, ready to fight. There are so many of them. It seems like they are endless. Dokoyeon attacks enemies with his whirlwind, while Light cuts through spiders with his sword. He yells at the girl not to stop, but she replies that he should worry more about himself. Through joint attacks, they gradually destroy the spiders. The girl has already fought off dozens of opponents, having gotten this far. Dai and Bondin are also participating in the fight, and they are all pretty exhausted. Russell's hair had already turned more than half black due to the use of her power. She doesn't say a word. If the hair darkens completely, it will lead to a nightmare scenario. Even though spiders are extremely tough, it is not known how to deal with them. Dokoyeon notices that the beast has gone completely mad, and who would have thought that everything would end up like this? She won't be able to continue at the same pace unless she takes a break soon. The situation will become dangerous. At that moment, she notices a drink in the guy's hands, which he hands to her, offering her a drink. He will hold off the spiders, and in the meantime, she should rest. The girl takes the jar, smiles, and asks if he can really handle it. Ban replies that of course he can handle it and pulls the pin from the grenade. He swings his arm and tells me to look more closely. He then throws a grenade towards the spiders. Russell notices this and looks at her in surprise. The grenade sparkles and shimmers with a rainbow. And then there is a powerful explosion destroying many spiders. Light covers his face with his hand and asks what kind of power this is. Ban replies that he put a lot of effort into creating this thing. After this, he gets on his motorcycle and rushes towards the spiders, telling his comrades to take a rest. He notices that Russell still has some power left, but it is too unpredictable to be relied upon. With the monsters constantly arriving, no one knows how long they'll last. Giving Light and Dokoyeon a break is the best option. If he can destroy as many enemies as he can, he will buy the others precious time. Suddenly a sign appears next to his face. It says that the level of the bloody tide sword has risen to 15, and he has mastered the concept of a slashing blow fluently, and the depth of his understanding has reached the 2nd level. He sees his sword turn red. The guy doesn't know how blood poison works, but I am ready to find out and test it in practice. He rides his motorcycle while swinging his sword, killing spiders. At some point, he notices that the trajectory of the blow has changed. It has become much easier to destroy enemies. The weapon's area of effect has expanded significantly. When Slash is empowered, the cutting power increases, and blood poison increases the attack range and radius. However, this comes at a price. The poison sucks out his blood. With each swing, he loses vitality, and this technique cannot be used too often. One of the fighters notices the strange aura of the sword and inquires about its nature. In response, he hears that Russell has committed genocide among the spiders, and it is better not to interfere with her now. Ban believes that his comrades should not interfere in this. They need rest. Light objects, as he thinks they've had enough rest thanks to him. At that moment, they notice that the spider swarm has noticeably diminished. Dokoyeon points out that it doesn't look like the battle is over. Usually when a wave stops, it means the battle is over, or something stronger is approaching. Russell, with a blazing gaze, loses his composure and fights with full force. Suddenly a portal appears, from which a huge spider emerges. Ban is confused, because they were told that such monsters only appear in the 50th room. He focuses on the monster in front of him, but Light tries to get his attention. Everything is going according to the expected scenario. There should be more monsters. They notice a second giant spider and can't understand how the situation could get any worse. Two huge monsters, one in front, one behind. Light begins to doubt the reality of what is happening and wonders if anything written in the manual corresponds to reality. Dokoyeon, showing no sign of concern, calmly sips his drink. Russell, blinded by rage, rushes with all her might to attack the monster. The boys notice how recklessly she attacks, having already been wounded by the spider's claws. And perhaps such determination will even play into their hands. Ban tells his comrade to stay close to Russell. Together they will take one spider each, one in front, one behind. He himself, together with Dokoyeon, will fight the spider that is behind. Despite his confident words about division, he himself does not fully understand what exactly needs to be done to defeat such monsters. First, he'll need a cleaving strike and blood poison. Otherwise, he won't be able to break through these monsters. Normal attacks might not even work on such huge targets. A girl approaches him. He remembers that she said that she would cope with the monster together with him. He understands that he cannot cope alone, but still refuses to ask her for help. She comes closer and wonders if it is pride or something else that is stopping him. The boy blushes. At this time, Dokoyeon throws him an empty can of soda and says that it tastes unusual but pleasant. From that moment on, he kind of pays her back with this drink. Perhaps such payment seems excessive, but he should not perceive it as a debt. Ban notices the girl taking out her sword. He knows she could handle it even with her bare hands. And now she wonders why she would use a weapon. He suspects that she wants to show him something important. She claims that the guy is missing just one action, and she is going to show it, but only once. This single blow should be enough to deal with the monster. She gathers a huge amount of vortex energy in her hands and tells him to watch carefully. Meanwhile, Russell loses control of himself and suddenly attacks his comrade. Her sharp claws scrape against the metal of the sword. She screams in rage, not understanding anything. At the same moment, the spider releases a sticky web from its abdomen. Light tries to fight back, but gets lost in what's happening. Russell jumps back and the web hits the guy. Now Light is stuck to the pole and cannot escape from the sticky trap. Ban notices the growing chaos. He is distracted by Dokoyeon, who orders him to focus on the girl. Suddenly the guy notices that something strange happened to the spider. Dokoyeon claims that everything is under control. She did a great job. The girl cut the spider in half, and now there was only one enemy left. It was just a swing of the sword. Simple movement, cut from bottom to top. But in this extremely simple action, the guy saw something more. More precisely, death itself dividing the world. Suddenly, notifications appeared before his eyes, telling him that he had instantly realized that the expansion of the technique was increasing the power of control. The depth of understanding of what he saw, heard, and said increased by 5. He managed to grasp part of an extremely powerful and complex concept of martial arts. Just by noticing a fraction of the girl's skills, he achieved an incredible increase in his inner level. It all reminded her of the moment she encountered Ortima's force field. She probably used an advanced version of that strike, one that cuts through death itself. He trembles, not understanding how a person can put so much will into one movement of the sword. The concept of death, which he had only previously studied, appeared before him so vividly and powerfully that goosebumps ran across his skin. Dokoyeon approaches him and asks if he watched carefully, since she won't show it a second time. She then throws him the cannonball left behind by the monster. He immediately recognizes it. It is the core of a powerful spider they killed earlier. It has excellent characteristics. But the girl defeated the spider, and it is logical that the core should go to her. However, Dokoyeon claims that this is his reward, and today is not the time for modesty. At this point, Light screams for them to stop flirting and help him. Russell is still in a state of madness. Dokoyeon notes that Light looks completely useless in this situation, and it seems like he won't survive. At this moment, Rushel appears and tries to attack Yu-Wan. The only one who can stop her is Dokgoyan. The girl claims that she has done her part of the job and does not understand why he is looking at her like that. Ban notes that the situation is unusual. If one of them dies, the consequences will be unpredictable. Dokgoyan agrees and says that he will distract Rushel. In exchange, he asks to destroy everything that ends up under the beast's feet. She then releases a whirlwind towards Rushel, and he shouts for the girl not to stand around doing nothing but to come down to her. After all, this is exactly what she wants, to have fun together in battle. The girl immediately releases her claws and jumps towards Dokgoyan, with such force that the floor beneath her crumbles and pieces of stone fly off along with Dokgoyan, and so they meet in a fight. One tries to strike while the other masterfully dodges. Dokgoyan then grabs Rushel's arm and throws her over his shoulder onto the floor. Rushel comes to her senses for a while. Dokgoyan lets her go, saying that it was extremely reckless to blindly and thoughtlessly attack someone who is much stronger. Then she tells her to get up, because the fight is not over yet. She is ready to entertain her until she comes to her senses completely. Dokgoyan addresses Yu-Wan, reminding him that now is not the time to be distracted, and he immediately understands what he is talking about. However, this task turns out to be quite difficult for him. The girl claims that if he really saw her first blow, he will be able to cope. At this moment, the spider tries to crush him with its paw, but the guy manages to dodge. He is confused. Why did the spider become active now, as soon as the girls retreated? Although the spider is on the verge of death, it still seems to be able to deal with Ban. The guy decides to take action and calls for his weapon. Chains emerge from multiple portals, wrapping around the spider and binding its legs. Light is amazed at how easily he was able to immobilize the monster. Ban decides that he can use his weapon to restrict his movements as much as possible, and then it will deliver a slashing blow with bloody poison when the spider is within reach. Dokgoyan notes that the boy's blow was too shallow, and that in order to defeat the spider, it was necessary to decapitate it. Ban himself understands that the cutting blow was too short, and cannot understand why. He also notices that the blood poison has not fully activated. Meanwhile, the chains holding the spider begin to gradually break. The guy realizes that consistently applying the two techniques turned out to be a difficult task for him. After all, he had never tried to do anything like this before. And at that moment, the spider breaks free completely and strikes back. All his comrades watched the battle from the sidelines and began to worry. Before that, having parried the blow, the guy grabbed his hand and fell to the floor. He was breathing heavily. For a moment, it seemed to him that he would not be able to block the attack. As soon as the spider touched the blade of the sword, it changed the angle and shifted the direction of the blow. If he had taken that attack head-on, both the sword and the arm would have surely been torn apart. However, no one could understand how he was able to feel it. It was only a moment, but it seemed to last forever. Was it because he had observed Dokgoyan's sword technique earlier? A sign appeared next to him that read, "In the process of repelling the enemy's attack, he realized his concept of the flow, and the depth of his understanding reached its climax." So that blow really affected him, and it was amazing. He never thought that what he saw could awaken the dark essence of martial arts that was dormant deep inside him, the existence of which he did not even know. Even if he couldn't exactly replicate the girl's sword technique, he already knew what he had to do. Yu-Wan then suggested that the spider try to attack him again. The monster roared loudly and pointed its spikes towards the guy. Light remembered that there was a concept of parrying, a movement that blocks or deflects an opponent's blow to the side, capable of preventing an attack or a fatal wound. If successful, you can even counterattack the enemy. However, this is just a concept, not reality. In fact, it's quite easy to die before you fully master this skill. Another way had to be found, but what must be, must be. He watched Yu-Wan carefully. It was hard to believe that he could try to master the technique in such a critical situation. The question arose, is this even possible? Ban continued to fight masterfully. First, he took the attack head-on, then he reflected it and deflected it to the side, after which he redirected his blow. And now, with the help of the all-seeing eyes, he began to see everything. At this time, Rushel, overcome with rage, attacked Dokgoyan again. But she calmly dodged without straining herself. And Rushel, losing her balance, stumbled and fell, slightly scratching her face on the floor. Dokgoyan watched the boy. She knew that he would learn from that first blow, but she didn't expect him to show something so unexpected. The fighting technique that embodied the essence of the flow existed in the Central Plains, and only a few tried to master it. Redirecting an enemy's attack in 100,000th of a second is a technique that requires incredible reflexes. Ban struck, causing a small explosion. Mastering such tactics involved enormous risk and excessive effort. Most people chose the easier paths, but someone like Dokoyan always specialized in martial arts aimed at destruction. Now what was happening made her look at everything differently. What had seemed like a minor trick before turned out to be something unexpectedly profound. She would never have thought that it could look so impressive. At that moment she saw that Russell had recovered and risen from the floor. The girl realized that simply redirecting attacks would not end the fight. To win, you had to go beyond the limits. If Ban had already come this far, he should have shown more. If he directed the stream to reflect the enemy's power, he could of course use the same force to counterattack. The guy gathered his strength and ran towards the spider. Dokgoyan immediately felt the force of the piercing blow. Then Yu-Wan used a spin. Moving at a tremendous speed, he activated his second ability. With determination, he walked straight towards the spider's face and split its head in two. Dokgoyan was truly glad that the boy had made it. Together they fall to the floor, one dead, the other exhausted. At this point, Ban temporarily merged the internal concept with the external one and realized how to create a more powerful one. He couldn't believe he had done it. There had been major changes in his inner being. Light called out to him, asking for help if he had already dealt with the spider. Dokgoyan, holding Russell in her beast form, also made a request. In response, Ban remarked that they weren't relying too much on someone who had just barely dealt with a monster. Dokgoyan acknowledged the beast's tenacity and added that she too would like to just stand aside like Light. Ban noted that it was a good idea, and a snake appeared in his hand. He absorbed the concept of the web that Light was caught in, and he fed her to his beast. The depth of understanding of the spiritual beast has reached level 25, and the skill Absorbing Net has reached level 16. He then summoned a chain net and threw it towards Russell. Now the girl lay bound in chains and could not get out. Any attempts were in vain. These chains wrapped around her and sucked out her magical power. The more she tried to escape, the more they drained her energy. They noticed that the chains were working. Even the student ID card was lit up again. Since they had been told to leave the tower, they wondered if they should leave now. At the moment it seemed like a good idea. Suddenly, a red clot appeared in the air, declaring that they were children who had overcome the trials. No one realized where the voice was coming from until they turned around and saw a red sphere that announced that it was going to give them a reward. A female figure emerged from the sphere, declaring that she would give them the opportunity to make a pact with the Thousand-Eyed Watcher. Meanwhile, Professor Yumina stood at the entrance to the tower, holding her student ID cards in her hands and looking worried. Suddenly, a bright beam of light burst out from underground. At this point, all four of them appeared. Ban was the first to ask if everyone had gotten out safely. Yumina noticed them and asked if anyone was hurt. Ban replied that everything was fine and asked her to calm down. Other students noticed them too. The professor was really worried because earlier there was a notice posted about the need to leave the tower, but for a long time, no one came out. She was genuinely glad that everyone had returned safe and sound. However, she wondered what had happened inside. Had they managed to clean up? Yu-Wan scratched his head and didn't know what to answer. They decided to take a short walk, and finding themselves in another place, he himself asked the professor a question. What exactly happened? After the fourth test, they were caught off guard by an unusual room. It had been only a short time since they had entered the tower. The question arose as to what happened outside after their disappearance. The professor explained that something terrible had happened. One of the students had been killed by an outsider. The academy is currently trying to sort out the situation. However, the students who were in the same group as the deceased are taking the incident extremely hard, and that is why the failure occurred. They recalled previous conversations about external threats and violators. Spatial pirates specifically hunt newcomers. If they kill someone, they take their student ID. In this case, the person loses the opportunity to be reborn and remains forever imprisoned in the tower. The trail of the offender was lost. The students who were at the scene were unable to stop him. Dokgoyan expressed the opinion that everything that was happening looked like a pre-planned attack. Even if the perpetrator is not a student at the academy, there are many outsiders who seek to climb the Tower of Babel. For them, newcomers are a great opportunity. The murder of a first-year student taking the entrance exam to the Grand Academy. At the same time, it undermines her reputation and allows the attacker to take the place of the tower conqueror, thereby receiving the coveted student card. Thus, the position of the academy becomes clear. This is a test that everyone must overcome. The academy is relieved of responsibility, and Dokgoyan wonders if the professor shares this point of view. After all, the Union Academy is a place where outsiders can brazenly invade the tower that defines the purpose of the student's existence, and no one can protect them from death. It seems absurd, especially for an institution once considered the greatest in all dimensions. Her friends were silent. Professor Yumina noted that there is a reason for everything. The United Academy does have a duty to protect its students, but once they are inside the tower, the responsibility for their fate falls entirely on them. Moreover, if the tower itself chooses an attacker instead of a student, the Academy has no right to interfere, since this is the will of the tower. Dokgoyan clarified whether this case is considered a manifestation of the tower's will. If so, she even likes it. She took her student card and teleported to another place. Ban tried to convince her to try to understand the others, as something disturbing had happened inside the tower. The professor asked them to tell what exactly they saw there. Yu-Wan noted that they encountered something unusual before returning. All his friends silently looked at the floor with sadness in their eyes. Then Yu-Wan said that they all saw a constellation. This caused great surprise in the professor. Constellations are transcendental patrons, and observers monitoring countless dimensions. When they find a person they are interested in or attracted to, they enter into a contract with them. These creatures have the power to influence the world, and they provide magical powers, artifacts, and abilities to attract followers. In return, they demand a lot, but in a world where strength is valued, almost no one refuses. Constellations are considered to be extremely attractive partners. While observing the sights of the tower, a voice began to speak to Yu-Wan. The mysterious entity offered him power in exchange for fulfilling its conditions. Yumina was shocked. To make contact with a constellation on the very first day was an event that had no analogues in the entire history of the Academy. This meant that their potential was recognized at the highest level. Ban questioned the seriousness of what was happening and asked how the Academy felt about such contracts. The professor said the Academy officially remains neutral. However, if the opportunity arises, students are encouraged to take advantage of it. In this dimension, the tower is the place where the interest of the constellations is most concentrated. This caused outrage. Despite the lack of proper protection from intruders, the Academy is so friendly towards creatures about which almost nothing is known. The professor asked what exactly the observer had asked Yu-Wan to do. He replied she needed murder. She promised to sign a contract with those two. Who will kill the other two first? That was her demand. She had previously said that only the blood flowing through her veins could bring her song and praise. Children with outstanding potential were asked to kill a comrade by cutting his throat and give her blood to the observer. In exchange, she will accept them as direct descendants of her branch, and will never leave them until the very top of the tower. Ban was shocked. They were required to kill their friends for power. It seemed madness. He noticed that Dokgoyan, as if hypnotized, came closer to the observer. Then, releasing her energy, she made it disappear. The professor realized that in front of them was a creature that perceived their lives as toys. It was disgusting. Ban expressed outrage at the very fact of such an ordeal. He asked if they could return to the tower by the end of the week. The professor said that most likely not, it was too dangerous. The Academy will now closely monitor the tower to catch the attacker. With the duel with Ereto approaching on Tuesday, not being able to climb the tower was inconvenient. The rest of the time was to be devoted to training. The guy said that he would think about writing a report on what happened, using the footage from their camera. The professor said she would be happy to listen to him over dinner. But now this is impossible. Everyone is exhausted both physically and mentally. The girl added that they had done well and promised to try to prevent something like this from happening again in the future. She hoped that none of the students thought less of the Academy, and she wished them a good rest. Rochelle and Light teleported together. Yu-Wan was about to leave as well, but Yumina stopped him. She had a question for him. She asked directly because the observer had promised a contract with just anyone, specifically with him and Dokgoyan. He agreed. It was indeed not just an attempt to set them against each other, but a kind of selection, like sifting gold from sand. Earlier, the observer indicated that it was they, Ban and Dokgoyan, who would reach the top of the tower. If they get rid of the useless cargo by pointing the finger at Rochelle and Light. Both were shocked by such words. The creature gave orders to its chosen ones to kill these two, promising something significant in return. Only those with truly bright potential will be able to stay and advance further. The meaning was clear. You need to kill and capture. That's real life. Finally, Yuan teleported to his room. There he saw Light, without undressing or taking a shower, sitting on the sofa, deep in thought. He asked if he really didn't mind sitting in that position. Light, in turn, asked if Yuan teased him for sitting in an unmanly manner. Yuan was surprised. This was not at all what he thought. Light apologized, explaining that he simply wanted to vent and didn't mind being scolded. But Ban wasn't even going to do that. Then Light sadly asked if he wasn't even worthy of insults. Ban didn't understand why his friend was behaving like this. Where was his former pride? His thoughts were interrupted by Light's frank confession. He admitted that he hated his partner. He wanted to say that he also felt hatred towards him, and that they were finally on the same page. He believes that there is no point in simply calling an idiot an idiot. It is based only on emotions. After that, he sits down in the chair opposite and says to Light that if he has something to say, he should speak out. He will listen to him. Even if it's just a complaint, it doesn't matter. Light begins to talk about the world he came from. There he was one of the greatest talents, and this is not an exaggeration. His family and surroundings recognized his abilities, admired him, and saw him as a savior. He was entrusted with the sacred sword, which was not just flattery. Having received the power of the Tower of Babel, he became the last guardian to save them. Thanks to his faith in it, he was able to make a pact with this sword and enter the academy with a huge burden of expectations from everyone. But everything went differently. No matter what he did, everyone treated him like a burden. Ban said that the words of divine beings, or whoever they are not something to be taken seriously. Light replied that he could call them whatever he wanted since he was the chosen one, and Light was ultimately just a bystander to the two chosen ones. Constellations are transcendental beings, much stronger and smarter than humans. He can't understand how Ban and Dokoyeon refused their offers so easily. The guy noted that such proposals make no sense. There are many ways to become strong without having someone die. Neither he nor the blonde came here to listen to such things. Light thought that he was only saying that because he had unrivaled talent. Honestly, if there was something they had to sacrifice to become the chosen constellation, they probably wouldn't hesitate. But Light himself would most likely not have been able to decisively refuse. Perhaps he would never have made a choice. He is overcome by a feeling of annoyance and fear. He cannot forgive himself for his weakness. Sometime after the conversation ends, Ban takes a shower. He wipes his head with a towel and sees that Light is already in his pajamas and sleeping in bed. However, Light calls out to him. He apologizes for what he thinks is his whining. He says that it is not Ban's fault, he was just jealous of him. In response, Ban apologizes for burdening Light with heavy stories. They are friends after all, and he is always ready to listen to Light. He leaves briefly, leaving a cup of hot chocolate on the table, saying that unpleasant thoughts are forgotten when you eat something tasty. Light doesn't know what to answer, but simply thanks. Ban leaves, closes the door behind him, and leaves him alone. He notices that Light has changed a lot since their first meeting, and decides that he should be more careful with his words in the future. At that moment, Dokgoyeon appears next to her, and says that at least now she won't have to go into the room, which is already good news. Ban is startled by her sudden appearance and exclaims, asking why she is in the boys' dorm. She gestures for silence and says, "Not caught, not a thief," but that doesn't change the fact that she shouldn't be here. Ban thinks. In response, she grabs him by the towel around his neck and drags him away for a change of scenery. They go out into the yard and sit on a bench. Ban asks if she came here because the cafe was too crowded, and it turned out that she was wandering around and came in. Dokgoyeon replies that she was curious and decided to come in. She then asks how the dead weight is doing, meaning Light. She considers him pathetic, lacking talent, and unable to adapt. Ban counters by saying that Light has abilities, especially in swordsmanship and many other strengths. Dokgoyeon claims that all of this is due to the sword, and Light must understand this. His physical strength, fighting instincts, and special abilities come from this sword. Without it, he is no different from a useless fool. Moreover, he is not able to soberly assess the situation. He is deeply insecure and at critical moments loses his composure, turning into a fool. And this can lead to the death of those who are nearby. Even without that, Rushel also feels weak. Ban can't figure out if Dokgoyeon is insulting Light or worrying about him. Then he asks about her herself. After all, she had been behaving strangely since the moment she first met the Constellation. She was irritated, especially in the presence of the professor. He asks if she is okay. Dogoyan is embarrassed to realize that he is worried about her and thinks that he used his ability to figure it out. But Ban replies that he doesn't need to use his abilities. After all, it's all written on her face. He hands her a mug of cocoa and says he just wants to know if she's okay. The girl takes a mug, and after drinking the drink, he realizes that he just wanted to comfort her. She thanks him for his concern, noting that nothing serious happened. She was just really irritated at the time. She was brought out by emotions, both by the words of the observer and by herself. Perhaps she was thinking the same thing. Ban is surprised to hear this. The girl believed that the entity was the same as themselves. If these two had not helped them, she was thinking of getting rid of them. Yu-Wan couldn't understand what kind of nonsense she was talking about, but you replied that maybe that was why she was even more disappointed. If she had been more decisive, she would have been guided by the idea of taking only the capable with her. If I had been too self-absorbed, I might have let them die. And of course, she was angry with herself for possibly agreeing to something like that. The guy asked if she was serious about all this, and you confirmed it. Then Ban asked if that meant she could be considered stupid, too. Dokoyan shared his deepest feelings with her, and this is how it all ended. He noted that no matter how powerful the artifact was, if a person did not have talent, he would not have been able to go so far. Light certainly has a natural gift to be able to control this sword. The problem is his habit of relying too heavily on weapons. Because of this, he cannot respond to the situation in a timely manner. The same goes for Rushel. Her incredible physical abilities and enormous potential are only held back by internal contradictions. All this will not be easy to overcome, but if they cope with their problems, then their talent will surpass anything he or Dogoyan could imagine. The girl, remaining seated on the bench, agrees to trust him. If they train, the results will speak for themselves sooner or later. If, as he said, they overcome their difficulties and grow, she will admit that he was right. But if the result disappoints her, he will have to take responsibility. Ban is very surprised for putting her own judgment aside, and he wasted his time on these fools. He should think about it carefully. With these words, she leaves, jumping over the railing, saying that she will see him tomorrow morning and reminding him not to forget to bring his friends. He is surprised to hear about tomorrow morning because they only returned today. After some time, everyone finds themselves in the training room. Yu-Wan watches Light and Dogoyan fight. The guy tries his best to strike, but then it flies off to the other end of the room. Light, tired and dirty, lies on the floor and turns to Ban. He reminds him that he promised to teach him, but instead he only gets hit. Dogoyan thinks this is stupid, but explains that this is how his body should be trained. Light isn't someone who can change just by seeing something once, like Yu-Wan, so he needs to stop complaining and stand up. Light asks for his sword back, but is categorically refused. Until he learns to fight without it, the weapon will not be returned to him. He objects that without a sword he is nothing because he is a swordsman. Ban explains that he and Dokoyan had agreed beforehand that this training was necessary for Light to become stronger. He asks to trust them, at least this time. Light hangs his head sadly, but agrees. If his comrades have a plan, that really means something. He realizes this and decides to try. He gets up to start again, but at that moment he gets kicked in the face by Dokoyan. She reproaches him for being too open, for not defending himself, and asks if he's not going to use his whole body, not just his eyes, to sense her attacks. If he really knows all this, he must begin to act immediately. Are his fighting instincts really that dulled without a sword? Yu-Wan activates his all-seeing vision and realizes that this is indeed the case. In real time, Light's stats begin to inexplicably decline. He's usually a monster who can handle even Ereto. But now, without the sword, his powers seem to disappear. If it really is because of the sword, then his condition is much worse than expected. Dogoyan screams that he is getting weaker and weaker, and that without a sword he is nothing. But Light replies that this is not true. If he really thinks so, he should stop looking at the sword that is not in his hands and look into the eyes of his opponent. Light screams and sparks of fire erupt around him. He delivers a powerful blow that Dogoyan barely manages to dodge, sending a cloud of dust flying around. Rushel notices that her comrade's appearance has changed slightly. Now standing in front of them is a blue-eyed blonde with long hair. Ban began to suspect that his essence was hiding. But if this is not so, then what made him break away? At that moment, something glowed on Light's chest. He fell to the floor in surprise, and a worried Yu-Wan ran towards him. Dokgoyeon immediately stopped him, saying that the guy was fine. It was just not something that could be resolved so easily. Light returned to his normal state. The girl asked him if he knew what the problem was. He replied that Dokgoyeon and Ban were right about him. He also thinks that he can't do this anymore and asked if they could have another sparring match. Dokgoyeon replied that before they began she had to apologize. She had been wrong about him. The guy said that the changes were unnecessary and that he was the one the girl was helping. She interrupted him, saying that she thought he was an ignorant idiot. But if you think about it, he's the one who carried the bomb, and they'll hope that the bomb doesn't go off inside the tower. Light was yelling that he really didn't like her, and Russell was trying to get Ban's attention. At this time, he looked at the guy with his all-seeing eyes, not understanding what had just happened. Light emanated both a holy spirit and a demonic spirit. Can such opposite concepts be combined in one body? This looks like the reason for that outburst. Does S-Light understand this? They will talk about this later in the dorm. Ban apologized to Russell, asking why she called him since he was lost in his thoughts. You replied that everything was fine, but it was actually important. Maybe they should spar, too. Ban remembered her previous appearance and asked if everything would be okay. She replied that it wouldn't be okay, but they had the ability to keep her. Even so, she also wanted to control her power and be useful. Ban looked at her in surprise and agreed. He noticed that she seemed oddly motivated today. Had yesterday's situation really shocked her that much? He gave her a wooden sword and told her that they needed to set their own pace. There is no need to be as noisy as their partners. The intensity of the struggle will increase gradually. Then they decided to start, and Russell promised to try. But suddenly Yu-Won wondered, was this the life he dreamed of at university? A period of his youth as he imagined it. It wasn't chaotic, with fights and aimless blows from the grinding of love. More like a young boy and girl encouraging each other while honing their skills together. He's very lucky because thanks to Russell his dreams are coming true. The girl asked if she should start, but he replied that she should attack at any moment. The girl's eyes flashed, and her hair immediately changed color to scarlet. 5 minutes later, Yu-Won said that the artifact would not let her escape no matter what. She is restrained by chains. They suck out her magic, and the girl gradually comes to her senses. A couple of seconds later, she came to her senses. She worried about the others, asking if everything was okay, if he was hurt, and how many times it happened, but he lost count. She sat down on the floor with him and apologized. After all, it's because of her that Yu-Won is now all tired and dirty. The guy stroked her head and said that everything was okay. He promised to help and was ready to do so. So she shouldn't be too upset. They were interrupted by Dokgoyeon, who appeared behind them with a loud stomp. Asking if she had been training poorly while she was doing so, Ban calmly flirted. He replied that nothing like that happened, and that he did not see the expression on the girl's face, and he almost died. It wasn't what she thought. The guy was genuinely worried about Russell. Dokgoyeon approached the girl's face and asked if she had any ulterior motives. Training while thinking about something else is rude to your opponent. They decided to leave history aside. Ban noticed that the girl who was so motivated was now embarrassed again. She's too soft for Dokgoyeon. No, he took into account what had happened. And wasn't it amazing that she had any motivation at all? If it were him, he would be very upset and would just disappear the whole day. He doesn't think she has time to improve her mental state, but Russell is trying her best. Ban said he had recently asked the professor if he could leave the campus and take someone with him, and permission had just come. Dokgoyeon is confident and says that it's great because she felt isolated in this academy anyway. But the guy told Russell that from now on she would go outside the academy with him, and he asked her to go on a date. Ban was sitting in the store and talking to someone on the phone. He said that he was not staying overnight. They were just going for a walk, and he would be back before evening. Dokgoyeon yelled at him, complaining about how long he had been living in some world of his own, referring to the situation where men and women stayed up late without any intention. Russell came out of the dressing room, attracting attention. She was wearing the outfit the guy had recommended and asked if she looked okay. The outfit emphasized her figure, and she felt a little embarrassed. Yu-Won gave her a thumbs up and said she looked amazing. Russell admired the city. She couldn't believe that there was such a big and vibrant city outside the academy. Ban suggested taking a walk. There was another department store and a shopping area nearby. Before the girl could come to her senses, she found herself in a crowd of people and couldn't keep up with Yu-Won. Her vision was starting to blur, and at this rate she might lose sight of him. But then Ban grabbed her hand and asked if she was okay. He apologized because he forgot that the girl was in such a place for the first time. He also noted that the shopping area was very crowded. So it's better to hold hands. They both walked down the street embarrassed. And then they went together to a diner where they were served delicious dishes. Later they visited confectionery and toy shops, where they bought a stuffed penguin. After shopping, we walked around the park and looked at the flowers. Russell ran happily, scaring away the pigeons, and both were very happy and smiling widely. After some time, they were sitting at a table outside and were served dishes made from monster meat. Russell ate with appetite and admired the taste, saying that it was even better than she expected. She couldn't believe she was eating Ellen meat just a short time after arriving in the city. And all this thanks to her friend. But then she froze. Ben realized that something was wrong with her, and asked what was wrong. After all, she had just been enjoying everything. The girl replied that she felt excited because Ban brought her to the city for the first time in a long time. He gave her some beautiful things, treated her to delicious food, and in return she can do nothing for him. She felt uneasy about simply enjoying herself, not knowing if being here would help her better control her abilities. Then Ban asked her to look at his hand. A ball appeared above his palm in which her current emotions were formed, although she could not see anything. Previously, his abilities only detected anger from her, but now everything has changed. In this short time spent together, he was able to feel her other emotions as well. If they get closer and get to know each other better, they might find a way to solve her problem. Russell asked if his ability could reveal her problem. When the guy clenched his hands as if breaking the sphere, and sparks burst out of it. He said there are no problems now. He promised that he would see to it that her difficulties were resolved. And he asked her to simply enjoy herself today without thinking about how to pay for it. Russell blushed and agreed. Everything that was happening seemed magical to her, as if his words were turning into magic. However, the guy noted that if they pushed the relationship so hard, it could become burdensome. Russell replied that she just wanted to be closer to Yuan, get to know him better, and also understand the other girls, including Dokgoyan. Yuan didn't immediately understand what she meant. Russell admitted that compared to her, Dokgoyan may be scary to her and others, but she still likes Bang a lot. Ban replied that perhaps she did not feel sympathy for him at all, but simply wanted to possess him, as a weapon or a blade. Russell laughed at the comparison, but then winced, remembering the weapon, and wondered if he really thought that. The guy admitted that the analogy was strange and asked why she was laughing then. She said she felt a little better. She used to think that Yuan was an all-knowing wizard or something, but now she realized that it wasn't so. It made her feel like she could try to be a better person. She took his hand and asked him to leave if he was tired of it. He had already done a lot for her, and in gratitude she would like to choose clothes for him. Ban smiled and agreed. He told her not to think about the price, but to just enjoy it. The girl replied that dating such a capable man was a luxury. At this time, Professor Yumina was sitting at the table. Above her shoulder was a robot with a camera making sounds. She told him it was okay. Although it was a little tight, he only had to hold still for a second. It would be over soon. Suddenly a voice of indignation was heard. Information about the tower is spreading thoughtlessly. Someone has leaked the chronicle of the ascent. How could this be allowed to happen? These beings from the lower dimension dared to allow this. Precious information was recklessly released, and now it cannot be stopped. However, another teacher countered that the video did not violate the rules. They should not have thoughtlessly accepted someone from such a low dimension in the first place. The man sitting opposite told Yumina that regardless of her views on Ban's independence, the situation had gone too far. It was already an attack on the Academy's authority. He asked if she was really willing to take responsibility for letting this guy do whatever he wanted. The professor sat in his office, watching the robot's broadcast, and was shocked. Ban had gone so far that he could now film everything that was happening inside the tower. When he first announced his intention to conquer the tower and film the video, Yumina didn't pay any attention to it and didn't object. She thought it wouldn't work anyway. In their world, it was considered obvious that artifacts and foreign devices could not function inside the tower. Magical fields overloaded and disabled any equipment. However, he has broken this axiom and demonstrated the result. He may not even realize what he has done. The point wasn't that Ban simply brought a recording from the tower, but that he created a device that could work inside it. And that seemed absurd. The laughs didn't stop there. Yumina had previously asked if he was really planning to post the video on his channel. He confirmed, saying it would help draw attention to the rebellion, a group that could gain support from other students. Yumina asked if he was confident in his actions. The information about the tower had been hard to come by, and now he would spread it so carelessly. Would he regret it? Ban replied that other students were suffering too. Moreover, now no one except him can film in the tower, and he effectively monopolizes the information. Some points, such as those about constellations, need to be edited before publication. The more information that is shared, the better for everyone. The professor had previously told him that the world was unfair, but she had not expected him to decide to fight it in this way. She also warned that consequences are inevitable. No one can predict whether these changes will be big or small. Therefore, it is necessary to strengthen their position quickly. The professor will be calmer if she knows that everything is okay with them. The girl could not imagine that one of his intentions would be so unusual and wonderful. She said that if he wanted to be safe, he should avoid accidents. It seems that what he created will lead to the manifestation of something great, capable of bridging the gap between dimensions. The man asked the professor if she was willing to take responsibility for allowing Yu-Wan to do things his way, but she felt that she wanted to trust him and help him. In her opinion, if he films and publishes videos from the tower, it is his personal business. It was unclear to her what the problem was and who, in the man's opinion, was to blame. The man then turned to Professor Canton, who merely smiled and laughed slightly. He noted that even Yumina's lies sounded fine. Was he the only one who thought that this student was being treated specially? Professor Liliana of the Artifact Creation Department also intervened. She turned to Yumina and demanded that he simply tell her honestly who this guy was. Yumina replied that he was an ordinary freshman who entered this year. However, Professor Ryu of Combat Aura objected. If he was just a student, such behavior was unacceptable. There was a limit to selfishness. She should know that information about the tower was one of the most valuable. Yumina replied that the reason no one had filmed in the tower before was not because it was banned, and the lack of appropriate abilities or technologies. What is important now is not to ban it, but to discuss how its achievements can be used. Canton asked the question, what is the essence of these abilities and on what principle does the artifact work? Let them explain it so that everyone understands. Liliana interrupted him and demanded his attention. She has been working in this field for 200 years and claimed that artifacts created outside the tower do not work inside it, especially the high-precision equipment needed for filming. No circuit can withstand the waves of mana emanating from the tower. The more she studied this phenomenon, the more convinced she became that such a thing was impossible. It was an immutable law. But Yu-Wan managed to break it. The girl wondered, who is he? Isn't he from the lower dimension and doesn't even have mana? How is this even possible? Is he the only special one? She noticed the artifact that was used to make the video. She put on gloves and demanded that he hand it over. She would disassemble the device and find out what technology he used. But Yumina refused. She had received permission to take the artifact in advance. And since this is a student's achievement, she will not allow anyone to interfere. The shouting began. Was she really refusing to cooperate? But someone raised their hand, interrupting the argument. It was the head of the Department of Constellations in Babylon, Zeno. He said the discussion had become too heated, and until things calmed down, it was best to refrain from speaking. Everyone in the room agreed with this. Then he turned to Liliana, thanking her for her research and efforts over 200 years. However, even for a professor of his stature, Ban Yu-Wan's artifact seems special, and accepting that fact may be difficult. He explained briefly, Ban is the only one in the entire world who has been recognized by the tower. Someone was indignant, saying that this was a frivolous statement. After all, the student had only left the tower for the first time the day before yesterday. How can he be recognized by her? Isn't he from the lower dimension? Even if Zeno is the vice-rector, his statement seems reckless. Zenon noted that everyone is free to believe or not, but there is another reason to consider Yu-Wan special. He asked Professor Yumina to share facts that were not in the video. Perhaps this would convince others. Everyone was shocked. Is there really any more information? The guy realized that Yumina might not know and decided to tell him himself without waiting for permission. He said that Ban and his classmates were the only ones out of all the tower climbers who were chosen by the constellations. The guy who just entered the tower for the first time yesterday has already been chosen as a constellation. This shocked everyone. Yumina noted that contact with the constellation is a student's personal achievement, and he should be careful in his statements. Zenon demanded an honest answer as to whether he and his classmates had signed a contract with the constellation. Yumina replied that no, none of the students signed a contract. The vice-rector was surprised. As expected, these students were extraordinary. They probably found it difficult to express their intentions under the pressure of the constellation's presence. After that, he invited Ban and his 11th grade friends to attend his lecture. Others could not understand why students who did not sign a contract were given the opportunity to attend higher-level lectures. However, the man explained that what was more important was not the fact of signing a contract, but the fact that they were chosen. Being chosen already testifies to their exclusivity. From the moment they refuse the contract, other constellations will definitely start showing interest in them. It is precisely these types of students who should receive support in his lectures. He is a professor who teaches students chosen by the constellation. So if Bang Yuan was chosen, he is also his student. As for the interior photography of the tower, they cannot impose anything on the student. His abilities, personal requests, and questions will be resolved. Yumina realized that the purpose of the meeting was not to bully Ban. The vice-rector's words reflected the rector's position if it turns out that someone exerted pressure on a student. Regardless of whether he is a professor or a student, such a person will be expelled from the academy. This meant that Ban was not to be touched. He asked everyone to keep this in mind. At this point, the meeting ended. The vice-rector expressed his hope that everyone would have a good rest of the week. One of the professors was surprised that Ban was able to win the rector's favor. Canton approached Yumina and suggested that they celebrate her student's success at a bar, but she ignored him and teleported away. Everyone laughed at how awkward he looked and invited him to have a drink with them. The next day, Yuan was in the cafeteria. With a tray of food, he approached the table where other students were sitting. A crowd gathered around him, everyone introducing themselves, saying what dimension they were from, asking if he was on the student council, offering to exchange numbers. Some people asked if it was true that he was from the lower dimension. One girl asked him out on a date, another wanted to meet him in the evening. Classmates didn't understand what was happening. Eslight explained that their channel went viral. The video of the tower's ascent has gained more than 2 million subscribers. Now it has become almost impossible to find someone who does not know about this channel. Everyone watched the video and discussed the characters. Dokoyeon admitted that despite her doubts, Yuan's idea and abilities were truly outstanding. Rushel, clenching her fists and leaning her chin on her elbow, watched silently. Ban returned to the table with his friends. Everyone congratulated him, saying that it must be cool to feel like a celebrity. Ban noticed that Eslight also had a lot of fans and asked him to be kind to those who would talk to him. Suddenly, they heard a discussion about the video. Someone said that it was a montage and that so much noise was pointless. It was doubtful that anyone from the lower dimension could have passed through 4 rooms in such a short time. They discussed the size of the spider and claimed that it was staged. They said that everything would be cleared up tomorrow. Ban remembered that he had to fight Ereto the next day. Those who doubted him or disliked him, they were looking forward to the fight, hoping for his defeat. Dokoyeon said he had to live up to expectations. Yuan smiled and agreed that tomorrow promised to be interesting. Finally, they found themselves at the stadium. A judge stood between them and announced that the duel would be broadcast live on the Academy's official channel. The participants gave their consent and signed the documents. They stated that if one of the duelists could not continue or was motionless, the fight was considered over. Strikes to vital points were prohibited. Injuries were at one's own risk. It was also emphasized that the fight could last until complete incapacity. Yuan's opponent asked him if he was afraid of him, and he offered to surrender. If only he would crawl between his legs and bark like a dog. Only then will he accept his defeat. Ban stood in shock upon hearing these words. They stood in the middle of the stadium, their fight watched by Yuan's classmates and other students. Someone in the audience quipped that the lower dimensional being that had recently caused trouble would soon be torn to pieces. Ortima watched what was happening in silence. His attention was drawn to Dokoyeon, who was sitting far across from him. She asked her friends how the audience was reacting. Eslight responded that the number of viewers exceeded 10,000, but most of them were making offensive comments towards Yu Wan. The number of people who liked them from the video could be counted on the fingers of one hand. In the face of such widespread publicity, there was no choice but to prove one's competence. Regardless of whether he has enough talent to reach the top, Ban thought about his opponent's words, not believing his ears. He never thought he would hear something so pompous, as if it were a phrase from a third-rate novel. He wondered if the enemy had rehearsed such phrases in advance. Ereto grinned evilly, surprised at how Ban remained calm. Ban, in turn, stepped back. He pulled out his sword and prepared for battle. Ereto gritted his teeth in anger, and he asked the judge to announce the start of the fight and waited impatiently for him to defeat his opponent. He raised his hand, indicating the start of the fight. Between Ereto, a first-year student, and Ban from the 11th, Ereto raised his huge fist in fury, intending to kill the enemy. But Ban deftly began to dodge, swinging his sword. He asked himself internally what he would do with his speed. Ereto got punched in the face, and his stone face started to crumble a little. After that, he fell to the ground. He thought about his speed and the method that Dokgoyeon had recently taught him. It happened the night after a date with Rushel in the sparring room. It took a lot of trial and error to master this technique. The method was effective against new opponents, and if he could successfully apply it, he could consider himself to have mastered it completely. To achieve this, he constantly trained by parrying blows from a club that alternated in speed and force. If he manages to endure it even once, the enemy will not be able to even touch him. Now Ban realized that Dokgoyeon was right. Ereto hardly affected him. Ereto found himself on the ground, shocked and not fully comprehending what had just happened. His body was shaking. His mind was racing between anger and confusion. The very next second, a powerful blow fell on the back of the head, short but accurate. Ereto screamed, clutching his head with both hands, clamping down on the area where he had been hit. Ban, watching his opponent's reaction, internally noted, the effect was excellent. Before striking, he imbued the blade of the sword with an energy wave. Ereto roared in pain and rage. He couldn't believe that someone actually dared to hurt his body. Meanwhile, Ban, who had kept his cool, calmly squatted down in front of his fallen opponent. Without a trace of fear, he offered Ereto a choice. Either he was going to finally stop complaining and continue the fight, or they should end this right now. The answer was not long in coming. A flash of rage engulfed Ereto. He jumped up abruptly, not hiding his intention to attack. His movements became wild, his eyes filled with darkness, as if reflecting the fury of the anger raging within. Hot steam poured from his mouth, like a creature overheated by its own rage. He raised his hand, massive, stony like part of a cliff, and threateningly declared that he would certainly kill his opponent. The palm struck the ground with force, raising a cloud of dust. But Ban, who kept his composure, easily jumped aside. Even after receiving a painful blow, he did not draw any conclusions and continued to act in the same way, relying only on brute force. Ereto continued to swing his arms furiously, trying to hit Yu Wan, but every attack missed the target. Ban moved easily and freely as he dodged, as if he knew his enemy's next move before he even thought of it. Realizing that this couldn't continue, Ban decided to attack back. He swung his sword, running the blade along Ereto's entire arm. It wasn't just a movement. It was a precise, accurate technique. He knew he had no other choice but to meet brute force with brute force. The roar of pain that escaped from Ereto's throat sounded truly frightening. The vice-rector watched what was happening and came to the conclusion that this match was completely pointless. Viewers actively discussed what happened in the comments, doubting the authenticity of the broadcast. Many did not believe that this was not a fake and wondered if it was really summer and if the broadcast was live. Even after seeing everything with their own eyes, they found it difficult to believe that what had happened was real. Comparing the current Yu Wan to when he first entered the academy, it was obvious how much he had grown. One of the students watching the fight was confused. He didn't understand if this was really happening. After all, Ereto was knocked down immediately after the start of the fight, and it was done by someone from the lower dimension. Viewers began to wonder, were the abilities shown in the video on that famous channel really true? The judge watching the fight was stunned. Just a week ago, Yu Wan was not this strong. Suddenly a message was announced about an urgent meeting of the professorial council. Yu Wan stood before his opponent and didn't know what to do. Attacking someone who couldn't even move due to his injuries seemed like a pitiful act. For the fight to make sense, Ereto had to get up and continue the fight. But the judge raised his hand, declaring the end of the duel. According to the decision of the observers, the match was declared finished. Ereto was officially declared unfit to continue fighting. In order to protect the health of both participants, the fight was stopped right now. Ban realized that if he were in Ereto's place, it was unlikely that anyone would rush to defend him. He tried to object and asked the professor to wait, but he said that objections were not accepted. The duel was over. He was told to leave the circle. Yuan simply turned around and walked away. The duel ended without a chance to determine a winner. This was puzzling. But despite the unpleasant situation, he did not feel like a loser, which meant he could accept the outcome. At that moment, he heard someone trying to stop Ereto. He, despite the official end of the fight, stubbornly rose. He was warned that he was deemed incapable of continuing the fight and was required to remain where he was, but Ereto did not listen. He was convinced that Yuan expected him to capitulate, to kneel before the scum of the lower dimension. He had no intention of allowing himself such a slap in the face. He decided that he had to kill his rival no matter what. The referee tried to stop him, loudly ordering Yuan to dodge. For many, it was unclear why he had to do this at all. Ereto was clearly trying to kill him, breaking all the rules. He probably thought that since Yuan was from the lower dimension, he could disobey the Academy's regulations. This behavior, as well as the attitude of the teachers, who sometimes supported and then suddenly curtailed what was happening at their own discretion, began to irritate. The same criticism applied to those who were now dissatisfied with the outcome of the battle. Ban, not holding back his anger. He drew his sword across his opponent's body again. This time the blow was crushing. Ereto's hand flew off and ended up on the other side of the room. He screamed in pain and shock. The students who witnessed what was happening were in panic and shock, holding their heads, not understanding what to do. Some of them cried out that everything would be fine because Ereto's hand could be restored. But suddenly a table appeared next to Yuan. It asked if he wished to take the life, the strength of the giant, and the volcanic power of the monster from the hand of Ereto. He couldn't believe that this was even possible. Meanwhile, the judge announced that Ereto would be rushed to the medical center and ordered him not to move. Ereto lay on the floor, barely alive, blood pouring from his body. While the judge was trying to call for help, he noticed that Ereto's severed hand began to disappear. He asked Yuan what all this meant since he was ordered to just leave. Yuan apologized, explaining that the situation got out of control and he did not have time to react properly. The teacher was furious, not believing that this could be called an apology. However, Zeno stopped him, saying that Yuan should deal with this himself. He congratulated him on his victory and said that the entire professorial committee had watched everything that was happening. Now the vice-rector was going to ask him a series of questions, and he had to answer them thoughtfully and honestly. The first thing he asked was about that last attack from Ereto. Was it really true that Yuan couldn't dodge it? With his abilities, it wouldn't be difficult. The difference in strength between them was so great that the teachers decided to end the duel. Now they needed an answer that could explain everything that had happened. Why didn't he just avoid the attack? Ban stood silently, thinking about what to say. Although he had gained the ability to use the language skill, he had never thought deeply about what exactly it meant. The question coming from the screen carried a strong sense of pressure, even despite the distance. The guy couldn't understand who this person was talking to him. The answer was simple. He did not dodge the attack, but instead counterattacked. He believed that a student who ignored the authority of professors and acted on his own should feel the consequences of his actions. In addition, he wanted to make sure that it was an official sparring match where the rules had to be strictly followed, that no one will neglect them anymore and try to attack them from behind. Although the fight was watched by many students and spectators from other dimensions, Ereto ignored the announcement of the end of the duel and attempted to kill him. If he had reacted passively, it could have set a precedent and created a false impression. That rules can be broken when it comes to students from the lower dimension. There was little time to make a decision, but he believed his actions were justified and in line with the Academy's principles. The vice-rector realized that he was answering resourcefully, realizing that many people were listening to him. He had extended the problem between two people to the entire Academy, and that could not be denied. The vice-rector acknowledged that Yuan's words were true. Students who disregard the rules of sparring deserve appropriate punishment. However, punishing students for their mistakes is the Academy's responsibility, not something that a student like Yuan should be able to handle on his own. The judge tried to laugh because no matter how much chaos Yu-Wan had caused, his opponent was still the vice principal himself. He thought the guy was finished. However, the student acknowledged the correctness of what was said, and if his actions encroached on the authority of the professors, then he apologizes. He was prepared to accept any punishment for his actions. The vice-rector in turn replied that he did not intend to discuss punishment. He was just curious about what he was thinking when he acted that way. These words shocked the judge. The vice-principal realized that Yu-Wan had enough determination and eloquence to win the favor of even the Constellations. Ultimately, the blame fell on Ereto, who ignored the end of the match and attacked. Therefore, Yu-Wan's self-defense was found to be justified. The judge tried to object because the guy did something wrong, but the vice-rector stopped him, pointing out that the judge himself must stop such shameful behavior. After all, if they had stopped the maddened Ereto in time, nothing would have happened. Now he too will be held accountable. Attaching Ereto's arm shouldn't be too difficult, so that should be all. The students who had been watching the match began to return to their seats and were required to focus on their next classes. The vice principal praised Yu-Wan, saying that he had done an excellent job and allowed him to leave. The guy bowed, and he headed towards his friends. Everyone was happy to see him back, and he thanked them for their support. He admitted that the skill of the master of words and swordsmanship that he showed at the end helped him fight the monsters in the tower. It was amazing. The most important thing is that everyone was glad that he was not hurt. Dongua admitted that she enjoyed watching him again. He had become even stronger. She was interested in how the new power felt and how useful it was from his point of view. The guy noted that it was all thanks to how hard she trained him in secret. Then Dongua asked if it was true that he had absorbed Ereto's arm. At that moment, he had indeed decided to take just a little bit of power. But it turned out that there was so much power in the hand. It contained the concepts of a giant and a volcano, which people cannot possess. It worked. Until now, he had not been able to control the concepts of living beings at will. But now it seems to be able to take specific parts and absorb them into itself. Thus, he somehow absorbed the power of his opponent's right hand. Dongua wondered why he looked so gloomy. It should have been a good thing. The guy admitted that at first he was happy that he had become stronger, but then he realized that he had cut off the hand of a man, not a monster. He remembered the joy of gaining power, and it made him feel abnormal, uncomfortable. Dongua was shocked by his words. He had to raise his head. His opponent was trying to kill him, and the price was just a hand. He won and Ereto lost. He had to accept it. No matter who they are, he must not take into account the circumstances of those who attempt on his life. Ban apologized for becoming introverted. Worrying about things like that is stupid anyway. Suddenly a table appeared in front of him. He couldn't understand what they wanted from him this time, and all his friends looked at him in surprise. He was required to take an additional course without the right to refuse, the Constellation of Babylon, intended only for senior students, 4th years and above. At this time, the vice-rector gave a speech on how to effectively attract the support of constellations and competently negotiate with them. He also mentioned useful knowledge, how to avoid the wrath of the constellations, how to make plans to move from one constellation to another, and the like. When the students walked down the corridor, everyone immediately paid attention to them. Everyone recognized that they were people from a lower dimension. They said that Ban talked too much, stuck his nose up, and looked annoying. Someone noted that despite his origins, he seemed worthy. During the duel, he looked smart. Nobody understood what they were doing here. This was the 4th-year floor, where only Professor Zeno's classrooms were located. Yu-Wan addressed his comrades, saying that there was a rumor in their world that the more he was cursed, the longer he lived. Then he simply must be immortal. Rushel took the guy by the sleeve and asked if he was okay. After yesterday's incident, she was worried that even more people would start to dislike him. People said they didn't even know who he really was. He replied that he was fine. It was a little frustrating for him, but he thought it was better than being underestimated. He stroked the girl's head and told her not to worry too much. She thanked him for his concern and blushed. Dongua began to get indignant. Didn't they hang out together on the weekend, and now they were on the same wavelength? She asked Rochelle if she liked the clothes Ban had given her, and advised her to take her courtship elsewhere. Rochelle said that maybe she was just jealous. These words made Dongua very angry. She asked if this wasn't enough for Rochelle after what happened in the duel. Ban tried to calm her down because the first lecture was about to start. They approached the door, and the boy asked if this was the lecture hall for the Constellations of Babylon. He hoped they weren't late. Eslight noted that there had already been a lecture last week, and if newcomers from the lower dimension suddenly showed up, it would be very strange. He advised Banu to ask if he was worried about that. He was, of course, worried, because talented junior students could join them. They opened the door to the auditorium together and were amazed. Everyone immediately turned to look at them with angry faces. Perhaps because they were seniors, even Dokgoyan couldn't ignore their abilities. Rushel trembled in fear and hid behind Yuan. They were greeted by the professor giving the lecture. Ban immediately noticed that this was an auditorium for the gifted. The professor, introducing himself as a curator, noted that he was glad to meet him. Around him, Ban, with the help of his all-seeing gaze, felt a huge force. It immediately became clear that he had managed to partially comprehend the concept that the transcendental being, the protector, adhered to. He suggested that they take the empty seats and make themselves comfortable. This was stated in the plan they received, and the purpose of the lecture was simple: to understand the origin of the tower and the constellations. Since they were joined by younger students today, the professor decided to start the conversation with the tower itself. At first glance, it looked like a huge structure without beginning or end, but in reality the tower was indistinguishable from a living organism. As participants progressed through the tower, they overcame challenges and found hidden treasures and secrets. It looked like getting rewards for clearing rooms, but in reality it was different. The participants did not find rewards. The tower itself provided them so that they could reach them, choosing the most outstanding conquerors. Among the prizes were the best items, exceptional treasures. Thanks to an incredible miracle, the tower itself chose those who sought to know and understand themselves. Only those who are able to comprehend them can discover its secrets. This was the basic condition for any intelligent being predisposed to a high level of thinking. Ban mused that one intruder could turn the entire system upside down. The tower is alive, thinking, and choosing its own patrons. Isn't that too incredible? But then he remembered the moment of the mass mailing of the letter from the rector, which happened shortly after the intruder entered the tower. They suggested that the phenomenon observed in the fourth room was caused by an uninvited guest. If you think about it, there was already danger waiting for them in the first room. The creature that instantly killed Louis was a real elite. If the tower only started acting strangely after they arrived in that room, then the difficulty of the first, second, and third rooms remains unexplained. Panic gripped him. What was really going on? A wild guess came to him. But what if we change our perspective? Perhaps the tower became more complex not because of the intruder, but because they themselves began the ascent. Perhaps the difficulties and rescues were caused by the tower deliberately placing them there, or because he, as the future owner of the tower, began the ascent, if that makes any sense at all. The vice principal paused in his conversation, looked closely at Yuan, and then smiled slyly. Yuan decides not to think about it too much. If the tower thinks for itself and chooses those who climb, as the professor said, then there simply won't be a better moment. After all, their class faces challenges and situations unlike any other. As has been said, high risk comes with high reward. The rewards that the tower has in store must be on a completely different level. Looking at the professor, he still couldn't get used to the concept. With this audience, he didn't understand what was happening. The vice-rector, as if reading his thoughts, asked if he had already mastered the sphere. After all, there was a barrier around here. Some students don't notice it even after years, but Ban discovered it on his first day. His intuition is very honed. As expected, even as first-year students, the 11th grade students fully meet the requirements to take this lecture. After that, a sphere surrounded by rings descended from the sky. It was purple like space. Zenon placed his hand on her and stated that he had a question for Yuan. He asked him what he saw in the sphere. A lot of signs with the words immeasurable appeared in front of the guy. He admitted that he could not see anything at all. The professor suggested that he concentrate a little better and try again. Yuan replied that he still couldn't see anything, but he heard. He needed to concentrate again. He must see something. But the signs with the words immeasurable appeared in front of him again. Despite this, he continued to sit and tried to uncover the secrets of the sphere. And suddenly some sign appeared inside. He saw in the sphere a barrier, a gap in protection. But beyond that, it felt like he still couldn't fully grasp it. The vice principal said that he understood everything and suggested that Yu-Wan rest with his eyes closed. Just think, he unlocked the 3 main abilities of the sphere. He really is extraordinary. Now it became clear why the rector was keeping such a close eye on Ban. The vice-rector asked if the boy understood what it was. He honestly admitted that he didn't understand at all. The man noted his exceptional honesty. He wanted to emphasize to all students, both in class and in everyday life, it is important to develop thinking and imagination. The expansion of consciousness is directly related to the growth of strength. If they want to use their skills at a higher level, they need to develop their mental power and internal motivation, and they must develop their ability to think. Even if the answer is not immediately apparent, you cannot stop thinking about it. Ban asked, "If someone has high cognitive potential, will he be able to control the sphere?" Zeno replied that one day such a person would understand the structure of all things, analyze them, and develop large-scale thinking. Then this sphere will turn him into a pseudo-god. Everyone in the audience was shocked and looked at the professor in silence. The man explained that it might be difficult to understand now, but that understanding would definitely come during the lectures. This is the core material of his course, and it is closely related to the main topic of the lecture, modeling the War of the Constellations. He announced that that was all for today, and as an assignment, the students had to come up with a possible application for this sphere. The lecture was over, and he promised that they would see each other in a week. Yu-Wan thought that this was all too complicated. If it was a god, then what was a pseudo-god? A being similar to a god or a false god? The principle of becoming a deity seemed incomprehensible to him. This was because they were freshmen, and the rest of the students were seniors. This course was too difficult for him. As they left the auditorium, Ban asked his friends to explain again what the lecture was about. Eslight replied that he thought Ban would be the one to tell them, but they were suddenly interrupted by Ortima. Everyone was surprised and asked what he was doing there, but he told them not to make noise. They asked where Doggoyon was, and then a girl appeared and asked why they were standing there. She laughed, thinking that something serious had happened, but in front of her was only Ortima. The guy immediately rushed towards her. He said that he had some business with her. The girl asked in surprise if he really wanted to have a duel. If he wanted to die, she wouldn't stop him. But it was clear that organizing a duel within the academy would be problematic. Ortima dropped to one knee and said he was not going to fight. A luxurious bouquet of roses appeared in his hands. He stated that he wanted to ask Doggoyon out on a date. All her friends standing behind her were in complete shock. The girl herself also stood, not knowing what to answer. Ban was shocked that the guy fell in love with the girl who beat him half to death. Doggoyon didn't understand how a person could be unaware of another's feelings. She was genuinely curious about his plans. She wanted to ask Ban about it. He was very surprised, not understanding what plan was being discussed, and asked directly if he really didn't know why he was behaving this way. He obviously had some ulterior motive. There was no trace of affection in his gaze. Yu-Wan replied that it didn't seem like a lie at all, since Doggoyon was incredibly beautiful. She was surprised that he could say such things so casually, but Eslight noticed that this was his peculiarity and advised her not to give in. Doggoyon replied that she already knew this and did not need anyone else's advice. Rushel wondered, perhaps Ortima really did have some other motive. After all, when he invited her on a date, Doggoyon directly said that she was not interested in him at all, and that he should look for someone else. Then she called her friends and they left. Rushel looked after him sadly. She noticed that he was genuinely upset. After some time, they found themselves in the training hall. Ban reflected that after he uploaded this week's video to the channel, a new concept was revealed. Something had definitely happened. But would it help him advance in the tower? He asked Rushel if she thought his face had changed. She replied that she found Yu-Wan very attractive, but he clarified that that was not what he was talking about and thanked her. At that moment, an enraged Doggoyon approached them, attracting their attention. She said that during training you need to focus on the process and during breaks you need to rest. And now is the time to stop fooling around. The boy repeated that there was something unusual going on with his face, but Doggoyon snapped. Didn't he hear what she just said? He should focus on training. If he continued like this, she would make him train until the morning. He agreed, promising Rushel that they would talk about it later. On the battlefield, Ban and Rushel fought, flying across the room in a dangerous fight. Eslight noticed that his friend had indeed become much stronger. Maybe it was time to stop focusing on dungeons and move on. Dokoyeon agreed that he had become stronger, but was still far from the level of his comrades. From the very beginning, their training together only bore fruit because one of them was gentle with the other. In any case, tomorrow is the day of the ascent to the tower. Has he figured out what to do with Rushel? If everything remains as is, the hike will be no different from last week. If they don't find a solution, they will face the same thing again. At that moment, Ban activated his all-seeing eye. Last week, while watching Rushel, he noticed several things. Her heart was out of control. Any emotion became fuel. Her state changes dramatically depending on which emotion is used. When negative feelings become the source, it burns more and more and loses control. But if the basis is calm and positive emotions, the riot subsides and the emotions stabilize. However, in combat, strong emotions are naturally amplified, making violence inevitable. At this point, Rushel was trying to hit the enemy with her claws. Ban decided to change her fuel to positive feelings. He pushed the girl away with the back of his sword, creating a wind barrier around her. In surprise, she flew to the other end of the room. Dokoyeon and Eslight watched this. Ban, exhausted, fell to the floor. Rushel lay in front of him, growling. Then he realized, now is the time. He hadn't just been having fun for the past week. By spending time with Rushel, he had been collecting bits of her emotions. When she was happy, when she was having fun, when she felt calm. These were not artificially created emotions, but copies directly related to her essence. A magic ring appeared in his hand. Magic circles with hieroglyphs began to form around it. He hoped that it would definitely work. He gave all this magical energy to the girl so that she could absorb it. However, the girl waved her hand and pushed all the magic away from herself. Rushel growled even louder in response and rushed at the guy with an attack. She knocked him down and now they were both lying on the floor. The girl sitting on him was burning with rage. Her eyes were shining. She used her sharp claws to hurt Ban. At this point, his friends tried to intervene. A chain with weapons appeared, which wrapped itself around the girl's body. Portals opened on either side of her and chains came out and grabbed her arms. Yuan noticed that Rushel's hair color was gradually changing. He asked her if she had come to herself before she was chained, and she replied that she thought so. The guy was glad that she quickly came to her senses, but he realized that relying on chains every time was too risky. He felt that some change had taken place, but he did not yet understand what it was. Rushel thanked him, but he didn't understand why. They hadn't solved her problem yet. However, she said that thanks to him, she would be able to fight with a calmer heart. It was a big step, and she was glad that Ban was by her side. At that moment, Dokoyeon appeared, and Ban was scared because they only relaxed for a moment. Light noted that they did well, and no one was hurt. Dokoyeon said she wanted to say something important. Rushel looked at her questioningly, waiting for her to continue. Ban also waited, not understanding what had happened. But Dokoyeon remained silent, and she just left, saying that she had nothing more to say. She suggested that we finish for today and rest. In front of the tower, Light asked if it wouldn't be better to use the sword, at least when entering, since the fate of all four of them was at stake. If it were just him, he wouldn't insist. Dokoyeon replied that they had all agreed to go slowly, building a solid foundation. This was only their second study in the first semester, so there was no need to worry. Light didn't even notice how dependent he became on the sword. The more often he uses it, the stronger this influence becomes. The concept of a demon combined with a holy spirit gave Ban doubt. He was no longer sure that it was actually a holy sword. It may be better to keep it away if the influence is negative. Light asked, if he falls into the tower because of this, won't it be his fault? At this time, Yuan gained access to his characteristics. He also prepared his artifacts, Eva and Taika. This time he will rely on them. Rushel came over and said that she would do her best and listen to Yuan's instructions. He replied that she should trust him. In a real fight, he is truly strong. Dokoyeon pulled the boy aside, saying that they needed to clarify a few things before they left. Today is the first evaluation, and frankly, she is disappointed with the other two members of their group. She asked him if he had forgotten what he had promised her. He replied that he had not forgotten. They had both already begun to change, and there was no point in waiting for the result. Everything will be as he said. The girl added that she knew something about Rushel that she had not told him yesterday. While Rushel herself was trying to eavesdrop on the conversation, Dokgoyeon snapped her fingers. A sharp sound flashed through Russell's ears, interrupting her attempt. Dokgoyeon said that she becomes bolder around Bang. She then asked the guy if he knew what the word submissive meant, in terms of being dominated. It may feel uncomfortable, but some people find stability in strong leadership. In this sense, it seems that Russell really likes someone who can completely dominate and control her. Yuan didn't understand what she meant. The girl explained. In other words, when Russell becomes uncontrollable and clumsy, conversations lose their meaning. Ban apologized because he really didn't understand what the girl was talking about. She replied that it was not necessary to understand, just to remember. He said that he understood and would try to keep it in mind. Standing in front of the entrance to the tower, the guy asked if everyone was ready. All his friends nodded decisively. First-year special selection, 11th grade, second sortie, begins now. The young man opened the door. A bright light illuminated them, and they began their journey. Once inside, they saw that everything around was blurry and resembled an illusion. Dokgoyeon said she was confused because she thought they would start from the first room, but it seems like it's different. They realized that this time they were in a labyrinth. Judging by the number on the pendant, it was the 5th floor. Light was glad that he didn't have to start from the beginning. It was a huge relief. Dokgoyeon noticed that he looked like he had already relaxed. At this time, Yuan noticed Russell's strange behavior. She said that on one hand she definitely feels a monster. Everyone saw something galactic, similar to interference, which had no physical body. Light assumed it might be a hidden passage like the one on the 1st floor, but it turned out to be something else. There was an unpleasant crackling and distortion sound. At that moment, Russell activated her power and ran towards the unknown source, piercing it with her claws. As expected, it turned out to be a glitch phenomenon, when the external signal, image, and sound become distorted. The inversion of form caused a feeling of fear at the moment the monster appeared. This type was completely different from any monsters they had encountered before. There were a lot of unfamiliar concepts here. It was hard to figure out exactly how fault and inversion applied to each other. Inversion looked like something useful, so the guy decided to try to use it. He immediately noticed that the distortion was growing, but Dokgoyeon saved him. She told him not to get distracted, because it would be difficult to clear these anomalies and get out of the labyrinth. The path ahead was difficult, and they had to be on guard so that they would not be separated. After that, they moved on. The monster didn't look like something that would appear on the 5th floor. But that wasn't surprising anymore. Even little by little, the inversion was accumulating. The question arose, if he needs 100 of such distortions to use the ability, is it worth trying at all? Ban stopped Russell, saying that she shouldn't fight alone. She could go into a berserk state, and that was dangerous. He invited her to stand next to him. Dokgoyeon interrupted them, telling them to stop flirting and keep moving. Ban decided not to absorb the concepts emerging from the walls of the labyrinth. Russell warned that several monsters would appear nearby, and the boy attacked them, focusing on absorbing more of the glitches. They ran through the labyrinth together. Light didn't understand when it would all end. The girl replied that it was indeed strange. She remembered every route they had run, but this place, despite the different entry methods, seemed familiar. It wasn't just a maze, it changed in real time. At this rate, the only option may be its complete destruction. Ban thought about it. He had been so focused on collecting the inversion that he had overlooked something important. Dokgoyeon noted that if everything was destroyed, something should appear, but she was stopped by Yuan. He explained that a constantly changing path was meaningless, so there is some hidden trick hidden in the walls. He touched the wall, identifying where the solution might be, and soon found it. The illusion was absorbed. It was a concept that a person cannot possess. Another passage opened up before them, and he confirmed that his guess had been correct. Everyone was surprised that he managed to pass the labyrinth even in such a situation. Although he noticed it a little earlier, he was too focused on collecting concepts to pay attention. He didn't want to waste time, so he simply observed his surroundings for a few hours until he found the part that seemed wrong to him. After that, he told everyone that it was time to go. He was getting worse from just being in this labyrinth. Dokgoyeon noted that, if she thought about it, he had found a magical weakness that even she hadn't noticed. As expected, he wasn't just a genius. The sword passed smoothly through the glitch monster, and it shattered into pieces. Light noticed that the monster appeared again right after the previous one, and thought that their group was really different from the others. The The boy exhaled tiredly. Russell asked if he was okay, if he was hurt. He replied that everything was fine. He just couldn't believe that his magic power hadn't increased at all. Although he had absorbed enough, if not more, concepts than necessary, his magic power had not exceeded 200 in the past 3 hours. Nothing unusual had happened to his life either. He didn't understand what was happening. At that moment, Dogoyeon came up to him and asked what was wrong with him. He replied that even after defeating the monster, his magical power did not grow. The girl chuckled, saying that he had hit a wall. He absorbed energy, as if sucking it out of everything around him, but did not give himself time to grow. He watered the plants without allowing them to sprout. So he reached his limit too quickly. The boy didn't know what to do, but at the moment he was just trying to outdo himself by blindly hunting monsters. It wasn't the best way. A more effective method would be to learn something else. Dogoyeon cast a special glance at Russell. She said some people seem to enjoy being away from campus on the weekends, getting some fresh air, eating good food, and going shopping. Bang said that if Dogoyeon helped him, he would be happy to learn, and would even consider going out to eat or shopping with her. The best place for him now is to study the basics of the art of divine manifestation. Despite its big name, it is just a basic martial art, so it won't be too difficult. He had only learned the basic principles from Dogoyeon so far, but had never been trained in martial arts directly before. So he asked if there would be real training now, and if there should be an official apprenticeship ceremony or something like that. Dogoyeon replied that this was just basic internal training that even children learned. He should forget about all that and just prepare. Dogoyeon was surprised that a man from another world was talking about a formal apprenticeship ceremony. She tried to act like it was nothing, but the art of divine manifestation is not just a technique. This is a secret technique, strictly passed down through generations. If her father knew about it, he would be in complete shock. She recently met Yuan, who is also from another world, and now she is passing on the secret art, intended only for the descendants of her family, to this ignorant and reckless man. Ban asked if he really needed to undress, as he was very embarrassed. At this time, Russell and Light chuckled, pretending to turn away, although in fact they were secretly watching. Dogoyeon told them to shut up and told the boy to sit up straight and calm his mind. From the moment they first met until now, a strange feeling had been growing inside her. It feels like she wants to raise this person with her own hands. He was different from anyone she had ever met. His talent in martial arts is undeniable, but what was most striking was his potential. If someone with such abilities were to develop systematically, how fast and far could they advance? At the same time, she did not want anyone else to influence his growth and development. What was it about this man that made her feel this way? Ban felt the girl's warm fingers on his back. She reminded him that she had already explained the basics and asked if he was ready. He replied that he was completely ready. But before she started, shouldn't she recite a mantra or something? Dogoyeon laughed. Even if she recited the mantra, would he understand it? It takes too long to explain everything in words. It's much easier to introduce it into the body directly. And as for the initiation ceremony into disciples, where did he even get such knowledge of martial arts? Ban thought that if he admitted that he got all this from a martial arts novel, he would definitely get beaten up, so he just kept quiet. Dogoyeon said that they could start now. The boy was surprised and tried to stop her, but she managed to touch him, and the space around him began to distort, as if the universe was bending in on itself. Dogoyeon had previously said that the divine manifestation technique she was going to teach him would completely change the nature of his ki and mana in his body. The guy himself thought that this was a basic martial art, so he thought that it would be easy to learn. But now he understands that everything is different. The girl says not to worry. When he trains his ki, the change in its nature will happen naturally. Mana modified by divine manifestation stimulates the body to constantly consume magical power to create pure ki. Since both the body and mana are trained simultaneously, their vessel will grow naturally. In simple terms, it simply filters magical power, turning it into purer ki. He was already sitting up when Dogoyeon touched him, and it felt like a fireball was penetrating him. She absorbed his mana in an insane amount, moving inside his body as if paving a path that had not existed before. He wondered if his body was burning from all this energy. Dogoyeon suddenly put her hand on his shoulder and told him to calm down. Burning its way through his body, constantly moving the divine chi over and over again, That was what divine manifestation was. The deep blue flame inside his body was constantly moving from his heart. He felt much better now, realizing that using mana directly wasn't always the best option. A table appeared in front of him. He had acquired a new concept of martial arts, divine manifestation. The longer he trained, the more he felt all his concepts grow. The girl asked if he was happy with the result. Yu-Wan replied that it was amazing, and suggested that she choose any gift she wanted. He would grant any wish. She replied that she was looking forward to it, but now was not the time. She gave him a towel to wipe off the sweat if he didn't want to climb the tower alone. He stands around the corner, wiping himself off and feeling strange. If you concentrate on your training a little more, you can feel the circulation of divine power. The more divine chi is filtered, the stronger the body becomes, and the feeling is overwhelming. Just think, such an effective martial art was passed on to him just like that. Afterwards, he comes out already dressed. Light asks if he is going to upload a video of what happened to the channel. The guy doesn't understand why he's being asked this and suggests that everyone go. He notices that it's time for a snack. Light asks if they're hungry, and they decide to take a break. They had been on the 5th floor for a long time, and they wouldn't see any food until they got to the 6th. Light says that this is too much. Even in the army, meals are simpler. And then everyone finds the next door. They suspect that this is the road to the 6th floor, and it must be. But they are stopped by Yu-Wan. He doesn't understand why he feels this way. He hasn't even used anything. But just behind that door, he senses the dim traces of another concept's presence. Or maybe she's behind. The guy suggests going and seeing what's there. They go around the other wall but find nothing. Light asks if they went the wrong way. But Yu-Wan uses his all-seeing eyes and sees a wall that is densely filled with illusion. He reaches out and tries to feel it. Soon he stumbles upon something invisible, feeling it. The thin wall, as if made of glass, immediately breaks. His friends don't understand what's going on, but it seems he's found a new passage. Behind it is a long staircase leading upwards. Apparently this is a shortcut. A new table appears in front of the guy with an inscription that he has absorbed 50 illusions. He is surprised. Did he really find so many? A well-hidden hidden path is amazing. It seems he has found the shortest route. He asks his friends what they are going to do. They wonder why he asks this if everything is obvious anyway. They will definitely go there. Now it is no longer surprising that the complexity has increased.